has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr.
are not
President, Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6, and it is, of course, Wednesday. It's an incredible day to be alive, ladies and gentlemen, because there's so much to do, so much to talk about, and an awful lot of news to take in. Because right now on the front pages, everybody's talking about Donald Trump. Front page of the Times has got, "We won't kill the Ayatollah for now." Which is a pretty stern message. Trump poised to join war on Iran, is what it says on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Same on the Daily Mail front page. US poised to join Iran war. Trump sends jets and demands regime's unconditional surrender. He knows where the Ayatollah is, but he won't kill him for now. Trump's armada on the front page of The Sun. Donald Trump mobilised a vast armada of US battleships and warplanes towards Iran as the two countries last night stood on the brink of war. I'm told from people who were looking up at the skies yesterday in southeast England that you could see quite a lot of activity, quite a lot of military-type planes flying around, a little bit of refuelling going on, who knows. But it doesn't really feel like we're on the brink of war. Theo Rushwood's here with me. Good morning to you, Theo.
Good morning.
It doesn't feel like we're on the brink of war. I know that sounds like probably a stupid thing to say. When I came in this morning, everything looked pretty calm, pretty normal. Nice weather. Everybody's walking around. Yes, I was out last night in Borough Market. Everybody seemed pretty happy. It doesn't feel like we're on the brink of war, but no, it's kind of one of those things that just doesn't affect you until it affects you, right?
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with you, Mike. I mean, look, if there is a war, by the way, it's going to be very quick.
It will be very quick, as indeed is the opening to this show. So hold that thought, because we're also going to talk about Nigel Farage. He's coming on this morning. He'll be with us just after 8 o'clock. We'll be taking your questions for him because he is, of course, the man of the moment. He's going to be talking to us about the grooming gangs, the rape gang story, something he was talking about something like 11 or 12 years ago and being called a racist for talking about it. Now, of course, Keir Starmer wants to have a national inquiry. The big question today from an awful lot of the victims especially is, will the inquiry actually do any good? Will it actually cut through? Will it actually name names? Will it actually find people responsible and culpable and punish them? And will people actually go to prison as a result of what they did to cover up this ghastly, awful, terrible stain on British history? 0344 499 1000. Also, we learned this morning that a third of sex attacks in this country are carried out by foreigners. That's in the Daily Telegraph. 1,733 migrants have come to this country in the last week. The French, apparently, according to a piece in the Mail today, will never stop them. The food inflation bill is going up by 5.2%. Finally, they're starting to listen to us. I've been saying this for ages. You know, forget about your 2.6, forget about your 3.5. You know, food inflation is far higher, and 5.2, frankly, doesn't cover it either. Meanwhile, more bad news for Rachel Reeves. The CBI has downgraded UK's growth. They're going to take it down from 1.5% to 1%. So it's still not working. And, of course, HS2 back in the news. 37 billion we've wasted on it so far, and it still won't be ready. Now they're delaying it again. We've got lots to talk about. You need to get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let's do it. A very good morning to you. It is, of course, a Wednesday. It is an amazing day, as I say, to be alive, right in the middle of June. Beautiful summer weather that we're having. Theo Rushwood's here. Very good morning to you, Theo.
Very good morning.
As you say, if it does turn into a quick sort of strike, if you like, from the US into Iran, it won't last long, will it?
No, it won't last long. And the point of what Trump said yesterday was, you know, they've got the intelligence. They know where they can strike at any moment and they can kill Ayatollah Khamenei.
Yeah.
That's it. And that will be, you know, that he can, you know, the point that the American president was making is that he can bring this to a very swift resolution.
Yeah.
And indeed, you know, we learned over the last couple of days that actually Benjamin Netanyahu, had the opportunity with his own air force or his military to strike against Khamenei, and he actually was persuaded not to by the US administration, apparently.
Yeah.
So this would be, you know, this would be very quick. I think the problem for Keir Starmer, of course, was that yesterday he said that he was convinced that Donald Trump wouldn't launch any military action against Iran, only for Donald Trump then just to probably announce that he would, return to Washington and was ready to strike at the Iran leadership.
He doesn't get a lot right, Keir Starmer, does he?
No, he wasn't.
This is a man who came back from Washington having met Joe Biden to tell everybody that he was really, really compos mentis, and he'd had some great conversations with him, and what a brilliant man he was. And about 2 days later, he decided not to run to be president again.
He just needs to bide his time. Doesn't he say anything? If he doesn't know, don't say anything.
Yeah.
And because you know, it's just because actually the irony was that actually Trump had been very complimentary about Britain only a few hours earlier and had said very nice things, and so it looked like, you know, if I was advising Keir Starmer, just leave it at that. Take the win. You've got to win finally.
Yeah.
But instead he undermined it all.
He undermined it all. And of course, the picture that everyone will remember from the G7 meeting is Starmer picking up the papers from the floor, because there's one particular still which I saw yesterday on Twitter. I think the Tories put it out, of Starmer literally on his knees on the ground picking up the paper underneath Trump's feet. And, you know, it's not a great image for a British Prime Minister, is it?
It's not a great image.
And I know that people will say, it's just a happenstance, one of those things. But it's symptomatic, I think, of the bad PR that this government is involved in.
Yeah, he insisted that he couldn't let anybody else pick up those papers because otherwise they'd be shot for getting too close to the US president. But no, it's not a great image. And probably been far better, just as you say. It's just that
just
moment
leave
when
it.
he's just on the ground.
Don't go down your knees in front of the US president. It's not a good look.
No,
you know, it wouldn't have mattered if he hadn't bent down to pick them up. Some minion would have appeared who probably works for Trump, who's not going to get shot. Who could have picked them up and just handed them to him.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, but it shows you how kind of, you know, unfit he is, I think, for the position that he holds, because he doesn't really know how to behave, doesn't know how to look. I mean, that ludicrous video they put out of him wandering in the mountains, you know, surrounded by guys. It looked like something out of Reservoir Dogs, except for Wallies. Yeah. You know, Reservoir Wallies walking around.
A huge part of Keir Starmer, what he's trying to project is that he's especially close to Trump. He's got the US president. Exactly.
So why bother? Why pretend? Why just not be happy with the fact that you've got a meeting with the president? He obviously regards Britain as quite an important partner.
Yeah.
You know, that's good enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why do you have to go but he's my boy. You know, he's my homie. Sorry, I nearly said the wrong word there. You know, easy to confuse the two. But you know, there is a problem with Keir Starmer's communication. I mean, I said yesterday, why have we not heard from him on the rape gang story? You know, we heard from him before he went to America, and he said we're going to have a national inquiry. Yeah. But then there was all the fury around the actual publication of Brown S. Casey's report. And he's tweeting about dodgy roads in Britain, tweeting about the G7, obviously. Not one tweet about the actual report itself and how determined he should be or is to get to the heart of the problem, to go after the people who covered it up and to make sure that they get prosecuted. Why would he not say that? You know, he was very happy to call people far right for jumping on the far right bandwagon. Yeah. He needs to come out and say, we are going to absolutely bring the full force of the law against these people, because remember that was the phrase he used during the riots last summer. We're going to bring the full force of the law down on anyone who concealed the truth about what was really going on. And of course, Dan Hodges, who wrote a great piece in the Mail yesterday, he says Starmer knew about this for a decade, but he doesn't want to talk about it.
No, and he's you know, conveniently, obviously the G7's happening and the report came out at the same time as he was in Canada. But you're quite right to say, Mike, that actually, you know, it shouldn't be. What I thought was very telling was that when Yvette Cooper gave her statement in the House of Commons, Kemi Badenoch responded. Yeah. And usually what happens is that you do
get the opposite number.
So it should have been Chris Philp. But I think it was a good move of Kemi Badenoch to say, actually, this is so serious.
This is a big deal.
This is such a big deal that I'm not going to leave it to my Shadow Home Secretary. I'm going to respond. That's how important it is.
And she was right about that. Because in terms of the way that the country has reacted to this report, you know, Julie Hartley-Brewer came in here yesterday and said there's nothing in this report that's new. And I know what she means, but that's not the point. The point is that, you know, it's not the fact that it's not new. It's not the fact that we didn't know that this was going on. It's the depth to which it was covered up. That's the story. The story is the fact that, you know, as Baroness Casey said, words like Pakistani were tip-X'd out of police reports. I mean, that's the story. We didn't know about that.
No, we didn't know about that. And the detail is...
And the detail is the devastating thing that will bury an awful lot of politicians, an awful lot of police chiefs, and an awful lot of councillors.
Well, you'd hope.
That's what will happen. And that's what I want to hear. But that's what I want to hear from Starmer. I want him to come out and say that. Why won't he do it?
It's not
because he doesn't want to.
If you want my view, I share the cynicism of people like Marlon West, who was alongside Kemi Badenoch at that press conference yesterday, and Fiona, the lady who'd been raped from the age of 14, because they have. I think they have listening to what they had to say, they had a huge amount of scepticism that anything will be done, and that anybody will be brought to
Fiona
justice.
Goddard, she's on the front of the Mirror. We got her on the show later on. Speak up for justice, it says here. Victim of grooming gangs has urged others to come forward in a bid to smash the sick culture of abuse destroying young girls' lives.
But when Marlon West's daughter, and he told this story, and I know that it's early in the morning, and for many of your listeners, it's the horror of it is just unparalleled. So I say this carefully, but you know, when his daughter came forward, when the police found his daughter, she was strip searched as punishment for going missing when she was being groomed by these gangs. It was completely Kafkaesque, about turn, and it's the girls who are in the wrong here. It was. And so...
Well, we had a victim who was on yesterday who said exactly the same thing. She reported these guys to the police. They arrested her, and not them.
So why would... Because it was almost as if... Well, it was. I mean, it wasn't almost. It was that they didn't want the girls to come forward. They wanted to keep them quiet. And so this poor daughter of Marlon West was, in effect, subjected to humiliation, having been repeatedly raped by these men, to then go through a strip search by the police, because they didn't want her to cause a fuss. They wanted it it was far easier, because they didn't want to be called racist, whatever, those were the reasons, just to let it, just to try and bury it and allow it to continue. And so when you know, and there may well be, Mike, people listening to this show who know somebody who this has happened to. You know, this is why
it's hugely. It's the biggest scandal. I think it's the biggest scandal in my living memory in terms of a political scandal. Definitely.
And this was why Marlon West said it. Why would you come forwards? What if you're subject to these gangs? Why would you speak up? Because you know, Fiona Goddard, she can tell the story far better when she's on your show later. You know, she was losing her hair. She had to fight to get justice. It wasn't as if suddenly the authority, you know, the authorities, social services, the police, the Crown Prosecution Service swept her up and said, you know what, we're going to get these guys, we're going to bring these guys to justice. We're going to ensure that they're sent down for years and years and years. No. She had to fight tooth and nail to make sure that it happened. And it's still happening. And it's still happening. And we had a Home Office official in front of the Select Committee yesterday who turned around and said, you know, they don't actually know the full scale of the problem.
Well, they bloody well should know the full scale of the problem. Shouldn't they?
Of course they should. Of course they should know the scale of the problem.
It's in their wheelhouse, as they like to call it. You know, they should know exactly what's going on. They should know exactly who it is that they have to go after, and they should liaise with all of the people who have been doing these investigations, whether they're local police or whether they're local, you know, investigators of one kind or another. And everybody knows where to go and where to look. You go to Telford, you go to Rotherham, you go and you start off in Oldham. You know, you go to the main sort of, you know, hot points of where all of this stuff was going on, and you start lifting the lid and you start looking underneath and see what happens. And that's what I want to hear from Starmer. But we've heard nothing.
No, but it's... If you want money, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, that's disappointing. People, you know, that's disappointing.
Even if you look, and I don't, you know, it's just gone 6 in the morning, so I don't want to get sort of too bogged down in the weeds of actually what's being proposed.
Yeah.
But it's called a national inquiry. But that's a bit of spin.
Yeah.
It's a commission that then sets up local inquiries, and then you will have these local inquiries. But you know, I've seen the point made elsewhere that there is nobody. You know, the whole. If you listen to what these gangs were doing, they were literally trading in girls. They were trafficking them around the country. So actually,
it's a national conspiracy. It is not a single issue, single town issue at all.
So what actually needs to happen, and my concern, I think, people are starting to, you know, from reading into the detail, is that actually what's going to happen is you're going to have an inquiry in Telford, and you'll have an inquiry in Oldham, and you'll have an inquiry in Rotherham, but no, this is a all of these gangs are interconnected. They're picking up one groomer and literally selling them onto another groomer. And my question is, actually, we need, you know, there should be a judge sitting in
exactly what is being called
in London
for. And if
tomorrow to do it.
Exactly, and they should have appointed somebody by the end of this week, and that's why I'm concerned that Starmer hasn't said anything. He's talking finally yesterday over in the G7. All he was talking about was you know, picking up Donald Trump's papers and you know, making out these world statesmen again. But here he is answering Beth Rigby about any regrets that he might have had over using that phrase right-wing, far-right bandwagon.
You accuse politicians like Badenoch of jumping on a bandwagon for the far right. Was that misjudged to put it in those terms? Do you wish you hadn't said that now?
I was really clear that I was talking about politicians.
I know, I just said that.
Yeah, and I do think that those politicians need to answer the question, which is why, when you were in power and had the opportunity to do something,
but do you wish you hadn't
nothing?
Conflated it with right-wing bandwagon, because that's not what people's concerns about grooming gangs weren't necessarily right-wing. Do you sort of wish you hadn't said it?
I don't. I've never implied that other people with genuine concerns, and certainly not victims. I've been working with victims. I've seen firsthand the impact it has on victims. But I was calling out those politicians. I mean, I am frustrated in politics when people shout and scream a lot and do nothing when they got the opportunity to do it. It's one of the worst aspects of politics, in my view.
So he's had the opportunity there to deny that it's a far-right bandwagon, and he hasn't taken it. No. So basically he still believes it's a far-right bandwagon.
Number 10 spokesman said on Monday they were still stood behind those comments.
Which is entirely wrong, entirely outside of the brief that he has as Prime Minister. It's not for him to make a judgment on what other people's opinions are on particular issues, particularly if he ends up agreeing with them. You know, what's going on in his head?
So this is what I think is going on this is what I think is going on in his head, and this is I'm not agreeing with, but I think what's going on in his head was that he was seeing number 10, and they made a really serious error of judgment with it.
They did.
When it came
Another serious error of judgment.
When it came up in January, what went on in their head as they saw the tweets from Elon Musk, who was attacking the Prime Minister and other ministers on social media on his platform X, and then he saw Kemi Badenoch then row in behind what Elon Musk was having to say, and therefore he, as Keir Starmer and number 10 saw it, quote unquote jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
And that was the justification. And what they came to realise, and you listen to Starmer, what he's now trying to say is, well, that happened then, but of course there are legitimate concerns. Far better, in fact, just park the bandwagon comment. Just put it in.
Or even if he does what Darren Jones said, you know, perhaps I used clumsy language, but he can't admit that he was wrong. That's the problem with him. And have a look at this, right? He gets asked by Beth Rigby, coming up to a year in power, a year in Downing Street, what's your biggest achievement? Check this out. This is hilarious.
Amongst the things, I could do a whole list, but I'm really proud that a year ago, probably, I was interviewed by you and I said we'd do 2 million extra appointments in the NHS in the first year of a Labour government. We've now done 3 million and waiting lists are coming down. There's a whole list of other things that I could probably go on about for a very, very long time.
Yeah, you probably could go on about it for a very long time, but it would all be absolute and utter BS, because there are no great things that he can talk about that have been a success. And the waiting lists are not coming down. And here's your challenge for today, right? Everybody listening to this show, watching it, I want you to tell me what is Keir Starmer's greatest achievement in almost a year of government. I don't think anyone will be able to come up with anything, but by all means, please do let us know. You can text us on 87222, you can tweet us at talkTV, you can leave us a voice note, 0344 499 1000. I've been banging on about this for ages, and I know it to be true because I know from personal experience what's actually happening. He has not created 3 million more appointments. What he's done is he's cancelled people's appointments and created new appointments, and therefore he's created 3 million new appointments, if he has, if that's even the right number, by sleight of hand. People are not being seen. I spoke to somebody whose son is waiting for the results of a kidney test, right? And they've been told 6 months before we get the results of the test. 6 months for something which could be quite serious. I know people who have had their appointments every single day. We hear from people about the NHS. They've had their eye appointments cancelled, they've had their ear appointments cancelled, they're having appointments for their kids cancelled, and they get moved from one list to another list. There is no way that waiting lists are going down legitimately. It's smoke and mirrors.
Well, the figures out for a week or so ago from the NHS for the month of April showed the waiting list had come down from something like 7.49 million to 7.42 million to 7.39 million.
Right.
If that's your greatest achievement,
that's probably again as a result of jiggery pokery and moving things around. Everybody knows that the NHS is busted. It doesn't work.
It's a reduction of it's a minuscule amount, a couple of percent.
Yeah, it's a couple of suitcases off the Titanic, as they say.
It's not a material difference.
No.
And I think many of your listeners want to see a material difference. They want this country to get better, and it's clearly not got better, having despite the promises made by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves before the last election.
And also, you know, he talks about in the same interview, we'll play this clip later on, he talks about, you know, setting out our stall, you know, in the first year and making life difficult for themselves because, you know, they had to take tough decisions and make tough choices. Well, one of the toughest choices they made very early on was to take the winter fuel allowance away from pensioners, which they've now reversed. One of the other ones, the tough ones, back in January, was that they would not have a national inquiry into the rape gangs, and now they're doing it. So, you know, their entire raison d'etre, as far as the hard decisions is concerned, are actually, again, they don't stand the test of time.
Yeah, they made the tough decision to put national insurance,
and then they reversed it.
To put national insurance up for employers, and now we have page 2 of the Daily Mail, where the Confederation of British Industry turning around and saying it's downgrading its growth forecast for this year from 1.6 to 1.2%, and then down from 1.5 to 1%. And those are numbers, but those are real jobs. Those are people making the decision.
We found out, did we not, last week, 275,000 jobs have been lost since the budget in November. Right, 275,000 people fewer are now at work, thanks to Rachel Reeves. It's a simple equation. It's because of Labour's policies that the economy is stagnating, it's because of Labour's policies that people are out of work, and it's because of Labour's policies, which are so unpopular, that people want them out right now.
Yeah.
Simple.
And we've got another 4 years.
Well, you and I differ on that, as you know. I'm going to sit here and I'm still going to cling on to this belief of mine that something will bring them down. I think it could be this story. The rape gang story, I think, is going to be a real problem for Keir Starmer. And if he doesn't wake up soon, he's out of a job.
I agree with you on the first part of that.
Yeah.
I dare I say, I think, you know, as you know, we disagree on the election side of it. What I would say is that at this particular point, and this is something that we've picked up on, that's been picked up on asking questions, of the Prime Minister's spokesman, where questions just don't get answered. Yeah. It feels like that sort of end of days. Yeah. Where in actual fact we're only a year.
I was talking to somebody the other day who said this feels like the final throes of a Tory government that's been in for about 10 years.
Precisely that.
But it's only 11 months in. Yeah, that's the problem.
Precisely that.
Anyway, it's 24 minutes past 6. We've got lots more to do. Do keep your calls coming in. We've got loads to talk to, loads of you to talk to. We'll get to you all. Tony from Sussex says this, morning Mike and Theo, if the inquiry is conducted properly, then we will find out who and why there was a cover-up. People like Maggie Oliver should most definitely be involved in a big way all the way through the inquiry. Then we may get to the truth. I think if they try and obfuscate this, if they try and hide behind, regulations, if they try and hide behind, anonymity, and they try and keep things secret, they are going to be in a really, really bad place. Let us know what you think. 25 minutes past 6. This is Morning Glory.
More rapes are committed by white people, and that they will still be saying that. This inane, asinine response to what is a massive nationwide scandal. Yeah. But white people do it more. It is such a moronic chant. And yet I wrote about this at the weekend for the Sunday Times, and I could see below the line the Labour supporters saying, he hasn't done a U-turn.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 27 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham with you here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. It is Wednesday, the 18th of June. It's been a beautiful week so far. I was out last night in Borough Market, unusually for me, because I don't normally go out in the evening, but I had a little secret dinner. And loads of people out and about, lots of people spending money, which is a good thing. But still, the rest of the country and many parts of the country very much under a cloud. People feeling like they don't have that kind of, extra income that they could go out on a Wednesday night. A lot of younger people out and about in London, of course, a lot of tourists, which is still a boon industry for us here. But as you say, growth absolutely going nowhere. The hospitality business, struggling in so many different parts of the country, and there's no real sign of it improving. Food inflation, let's talk about that. It's on what page of the Sun is that?
Page 6 of the Sun.
They finally caught up. I mean, I've done this many, many times over the course of the last several months, probably, where, when the new inflation figure comes out, it's gone up to 3.5%. People that live in the real world know that it's an awful lot more than that. They've put a new figure on it, haven't they?
5.2%. And this is the Sun have got the figures from research, and it's showing the prices have gone up since May 2024. And it's tracked 27,000 products in 20 food and drink categories, keeping tabs on prices at Aldi, Asda, Tesco, Sainsbury's, and Lidl, amongst others. And it's this is what people are feeling. And
this is what people find. They go to do their weekly shop, and every week it goes up.
It goes up.
Whether it goes up by 10 quid or 20 quid or 30 quid, but it keeps going up.
And it gives them less money, of course, to spend on other things that they want and other things that they need, and of course has a knock-on effect, because food is, you can't, you need it, you need to live with it. So you can't spend it on, whether it's going out or spending time with friends or going to the cinema or treating your kids. Birthday presents, that sort of thing. So it's
trips abroad,
holidays. Holidays. Maybe you just stay at home.
Right.
And I think those are choices that many people are facing because times are so tough. And I think what people get annoyed by is when government ministers come on the radio or they come on the television, they try and insist that everything's
They don't come on here very often, I'm afraid.
No, they don't.
I don't know why that is. Why is it? I mean, you've worked in Downing Street, you've worked in the political
I haven't worked in
arena.
Downing Street, I've worked as a
But I mean, you've worked in Downing, when I say you've worked in Downing Street as covering it, you've not been inside the beast, as it were.
Yeah.
But, what's the thought process behind people who don't want to put ministers up? I mean, the Tories did a bit of it as well when they were in power, that we wouldn't get them very often. But at the end of the day, if you don't connect with the people that watch this show and listen to this show, even if you think they are the enemy, which obviously some of them do, what's that all about?
I think politicians are a lot more thin-skinned now.
Yeah.
And they used to have politicians who had, and actually, to be fair to him, Farage is more of this type, and you've got him on later, who have a rhinoceros skin.
Yeah.
And they know that they're going to take flak.
Yeah.
It's part of the job, part of the reason they do they don't, Farage took...
For Nigel Farage as well, a bit like Donald Trump, it plays to his audience if he's getting attacked by the media.
And he doesn't
mind it.
And he takes all of the questions that he needs to take.
Yeah.
He's not scared of taking the questions, and I think that's one of the reasons why and they've adopted this tactic of when there's a press conference that he takes every question that's going, and it's one of the reasons why that actually it creates a good relationship with journalists in the long run, because they feel at least you're there, you're going to answer the questions. I think the problem that politicians now have, or we have, I think it's actually broader than that, is that they're too thin-skinned. Generally, they don't like the nastier side. They don't like being made to look stupid. They don't like the difficult questions.
And unfortunately, it's quite easy to make them look stupid because quite often they're not answering the question you're asking them, and they don't have the detail, and they can't. What they should be able to do is outwit any journalist, because they're supposed to be the people with the facts. They're supposed to be the clever people. But I think, more and more as I look at them, they're not that clever, and they never have any facts.
So and what happens is that the politician gets made to look stupid, or look stupid on their own, by their own doing, and then they go back and they start shouting and screaming at the aide that's put them on that particular radio station.
Right.
So if you were to have a minister on here and you were to run rings around the mic, then it would be the aide that booked the booking with your producers that would get the blame, rather than the politician who didn't actually read the brief or know what they were talking about. And that's why they're very reticent to put the aides who do the bookings to put their politician on a platform where it's not cosy, chat.
But the problem for the Labour government now is that every place that they go is going to be difficult for them, because even the BBC have now turned on them. Even Sky News now ask them tough questions, which wasn't always the case. I mean, look at this from the Labour Party. This went out yesterday, and this is why I think people are so fed up and sick to the back teeth of being treated like idiots, right? The Labour Party put out this tweet. The Labour government is putting the British people first, and it's got a picture of Keir Starmer with his hands sort of like this. In an era of global instability, I will do everything in my power to deliver safety and security for working people in Britain. Now, everybody listening to that knows that that is complete and utter cobblers, right? We've got a figure here, 1,733 migrants coming in to this country in the last week alone, right? Over the weekend, I think it was 1,400. We're getting close to 40,000 who have come since Labour were in power. There is no question now in anybody's mind that the people coming here from foreign lands, mostly young men, are doing harm to this country. Forget about all this cobblers about, they're all fleeing in a terrible situation back at home, whether it's in Sudan or Eritrea. No, they're coming here to commit crime, many of them, and I would say the majority of them. A piece of the paper this morning in the Telegraph, it starts off by saying foreign nationals are responsible for more than a quarter of sex assaults on women, according to official figures from the Ministry of Justice obtained under Freedom of Information laws. They say 26% of the 1,453 sex assault convictions on women last year were accounted for by foreign nationals, but there's a further 8% committed by offenders of unknown nationality. So you add that into 26, you get 34%, which is a third. So a third of all sex attacks on women in the country last year committed by people from foreign countries. They're all coming here illegally, and an awful lot of them are committing crimes. Some of them sex crimes against women.
And it was an aspect of Louise Casey's report.
Yes,
buried in the,
she confirms
details
that current asylum seekers are involved in grooming gangs. What else do you need to know?
But.
So what I'm saying when I say that is delivering safety and security for working people in Britain. It's just rubbish. It's complete cobblers.
It's contrived, and it makes it takes the British public for force, and that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Don't you know? If you put that stuff out, then people just think you're treating them like. You don't need to treat people like children.
Don't talk to me like I'm an idiot. Exactly right. Have a look at this. This is Starmer on his biggest mistake. This will make you laugh even more.
In terms of mistakes, look, I think that we haven't always told our story as well as we should, explained our decisions in the way that might, in retrospect, have been better, but that's the nature of politics. I suppose the story at the end of the first year is this. We had to clear up the mess, and the first year was really about that. But as we now turn into the second year with the spending review, now's the time we can show that having cleared up that mess, taken those tough but necessary decisions, now you can see in the spending review, with the investment we're making in our public services, in our infrastructure, in our jobs, apprentices, you name it, you can see the difference that a Labour government makes.
No, you can't. Well, you can actually. You can see the difference the Labour government makes. We're now in a worse position than we were in this time last year. This time last year, the economy wasn't doing that badly. No. You know, now there's zero growth. There's record inflation. There's, you know, more jobs missing from the economy than there were a year ago. Fewer people are working. Unemployment's up. Growth is down. You know, taxes are up. You know, people are poorer. Absolutely hopeless. And he thinks we didn't communicate it properly.
Well, he says we did. You know, we failed to communicate the story as well as we should have done, and then goes on to tell the same story, telling it exactly the same way as he has done for the past year. It's not the issue. The issue is, you know, the biggest mistake. So where do you start with winter fuel allowance? That was a politically disastrous mistake.
Right. Which they've now U-turned on.
Which they've now U-turned. But they haven't U-turned on it, you see, Mike, because they've turned around and said, well, actually, you know, we had to. The economy is doing so much better, and we've just read out the numbers.
Yeah,
no,
but
of course we haven't.
They can't
but that's
say
the
that.
whole problem.
Yeah, but they can't keep saying things that aren't true. They can't say. Rachel Reeves said, "Oh yeah, we can now reverse this policy because we've improved the economy." They haven't.
No, because we've just gone through two stories showing that growth has been downgraded and prices have gone up.
Yeah.
The economy is not in a better position. Nobody feels that the economy is in a better position.
Yeah.
That's the crux of that's why they're in this dire state in the polls.
And look at Keir Starmer's own Twitter account, right? So 20 hours ago, his last tweet, say from last night, in April we took decisive action to save British steel from closure. He goes banging on about that, right? The only thing he's tweeted since then is great to catch up. Picture of him hugging Vladimir Zelensky. You know,
read the tweet.
Nice big man hug.
Read the tweet about steel.
Well, the tweet about steel says, in April we took decisive action to save British steel from closure. Now we're securing its future and protecting thousands of British jobs with the landmark deal to supply.
But we haven't got a landmark deal
for Britain's railways.
We haven't got. We didn't get. Trump rejected the deal when it came to.
Yeah, but this is a plan not to sell steel to Trump. This is a plan to put some railways down. Now again. I mean, I don't know how long it takes to build a railway, but I suspect it won't be finished by the time Keir Starmer's finished with politics. So that's a complete load of old cobblers. But the only other tweet he's done is the UK is ramping up. Now, how tone deaf is this about what's going on in the world, right? Look at the front pages. It's all about Iran. It's all about the war between Israel and Iran. It's all about Trump intervening and possibly assassinating the leader of Iran, the Ayatollah, right? The supreme leader. He goes, great to catch up with Vladimir Zelensky. The UK is ramping up the pressure on Russia. There should be no place to hide for those who fund Putin's war machine. We stand with Ukraine always. And here's a lovely picture of him hugging him. You know, very nice man hug there, pressed very close together with each other. I don't know what's wrong with the guy, you know, because at the end of the day, the war situation is not going on in Russia. That's not what people are talking about.
No.
People are talking about the situation in Iran. And of course, he rather stupidly came out a few days ago when Iran was attacked by Israel and said that they should de-escalate the situation. And Israel is going, well, hang on a minute. You know, just fired hundreds of missiles into Israel. They've killed some of our civilians. They've wrecked some of our cities. You know, and they've got the power to build a nuclear bomb. So we're going to take that power away from them. And why is he supporting de-escalation? It looks like he just doesn't want to support Israel.
No,
and in my view, that's wrong.
Of course it's wrong. Of course it's wrong. Look, Israel's doing the world a huge favour on what, you know, and Trump backing up. You know, Trump's come out and he's backed up Israel and he said that you know, America's prepared to intervene. We should be foursquare behind that effort. That it is a tragedy that we're not.
Yes.
And I think it is wrong-headed not for the government to come out and say, look, nobody's pretending. There's this myth that somehow Israel wants this war. Israel is a sovereign state. It wants to be left alone to live in peace.
Yeah, exactly.
Iran is hell-bent on the destruction of Israel and of the West.
And they've written it down.
And they say it repeatedly.
They've written that down and they say it repeatedly.
They say, you know, there's not been a day since October the 7th when, you know, Hamas still holds Israeli hostages.
I can't believe you just did that. You've been down in the bunker for too long.
Hostages. And the point is that at any point they could have handed those hostages back.
And they could do it now. They could do it today.
Now.
And they're supported and funded by Iran. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
How about this? Good morning, Mike. Starmer's achievements this past year are crashing the economy, worse than Truss, lying to the electorate, worse than Boris, negotiating bad deals with the EU, worse than May, stopping the boats, worse than Sunak, running away from decisions, worse than Cameron. That's Lisa in Dorset. Yeah, absolutely, Lisa in Dorset, I should say. One from Dory from Norfolk. Mike, easy one this morning. Starmer's biggest achievement is to be the most inept and hated Prime Minister ever. Thank you for keeping it real. And Stephen in Yorkshire. Keir Starmer's greatest achievement so far is killing the economy, killing small business and sucking all the joy out of the UK. Yeah. There we have it. I mean, that pretty much sums up how everybody thinks and feels about Keir Starmer. But he's all right, Jack, because he's hugging Volodymyr Zelensky and we stand by Ukraine, always.
But that's not where it's
what?
at.
Nobody cares about that. Let's get a voice note from Liam.
Morning, Mike. Liam from Kent. I must admit, Keir Starmer's greatest achievement is dinghy sales. I mean, if you're in the business of selling dinghies at the minute, well, you'll be able to mortgage another mansion the way things are going. So, yeah, I'd like to think that Labour's greatest achievement is they've managed to fill the country with basically another army from another country, and anyone that sells any rubber dinghies is now a multi-billionaire. So have a great show, Mike. See you later.
Yeah, Liam, thank you very much indeed. It's a bit like the guy that invented wheelie bins, isn't it? You know, whoever invented these rubber dinghies, so-called small boats, not small. You know, about 100 people on them. I mean, it's unbelievable. Listen, coming up, we're going to be talking about the HS2 debacle, because it turns out that the Labour government are going to waste even more of our money. They're saying that the Tories wasted 37 billion. They're going to now delay the completion of HS2 even further. Another 2 years we're going to have to wait. I don't think I'm going to be alive by the time they finish this bleeding train. We'll be back with Theo Usherwood after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
The return of the sausages. Welcome back to Morning Glory, the return of the sausages. We've all been infected by it. We can't get away from it. After the ridiculousness of the Keir Starmer tweet about the Ukraine meeting that he had with Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday, turns out there's an even more bizarre one, right? And this is a G7 clip. This is something they put out last night, I think, of Keir Starmer just kind of at the G7. Have we got that? Walking around. And there he is walking into a room, saying hello. There he is, standing with Donald Trump. They've stopped putting music on. I don't know whether our criticism of the music has been taken on board by the people putting it all together. But there's no sound on this, right? There he is walking with Donald Trump. Oh, there he is in the motor. Oh, look, I'm in a motorcade. Oh, there's some people on top of the roof, snipers. They do that at G7. Here we are getting on the stage. I mean, it's sort of like a scrapbook that he's going to show his parents or something, you know. What I did when I went to the G7 in Canada, and look at those mountains behind me. It's lovely, isn't it? Oh, look, there it is. And then what's it for? What's the point of it?
To show him as a statesman on the world stage.
But surely if you're a statesman on the world stage, you don't have to keep telling people. It's like somebody who keeps telling you how intelligent they are, and every time you see them, they go, do you know, I'm really intelligent. You know, I've got this certificate that I bought from a shop in Malaga, and it says I'm really intelligent. Do you know how intelligent I am? It's like, you know, don't keep showing us that you're at the G7. We know you're at the G7. You should actually be back here answering questions about the rape gangs. Thanks very much indeed.
Yeah.
Go on.
No.
I was going to say, let's talk about HS2, because we haven't got a lot of time. HS2, according to Keir Starmer, despite the fact he's done a great big deal with British Steel to build some railway tracks, those railway tracks are not going to be running on HS2, because HS2 apparently is going to be delayed further, at least 2 years now. Will no longer be completed by 2033. It's going to be Heidi Alexander who says this today, that it's going to be somehow completed, they hope, by somewhere near sort of 2036 or 7. But believe it or not, they started this in 2012.
Yes.
And the Tories, they say, have wasted 37 billion. And I hold no candle for the Tories on this, because that's a complete and utter disaster, including several failures, including the Euston Ministerial Task Force, which was set up in March 2024 by Rishi Sunak to oversee the London terminal. They never actually met.
No. I'm not surprised. It's just it.
What's wrong with these idiots?
It cuts journeys. It cuts journeys by, I think, London to Birmingham. It's cutting journeys by half an hour or something.
Not even
that. 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And there's a train line.
Are they not still bringing it into
Old Oak Common? No, they are going to do the extension eventually to all the way.
Yeah, but initially, you're only going to come into Old Oak Common.
Do you know where Old Oak Common is?
Yeah, I know exactly where it is. It's near Wormwood Scrubs.
Yeah.
I used to play football there when my school used to be involved in that.
It's difficult to get to. It's not a central London location.
No, they say you'll be able to get a train from there into Euston in about 20 minutes. Fine. But that means you haven't actually saved any time at all.
No.
All you've done is got on a flash new train and you've gone somewhere you didn't want to go.
And the reason to cut journey times is so people can spend more time working. Just put Wi-Fi on the trains.
Yeah.
Just make sure every train in the country has decent Wi-Fi, and then people can work on the trains and invest in, you know, if you look at what's particularly, I feel it's particularly egregious up in the north of England, where, you know, the train network is creaking.
Yeah.
It barely, you know, people, you know, can barely, you know.
Well, you can't if you try to get
anywhere
from Manchester to Newcastle, you can't do it.
No, it's impossible, and it takes hours and hours. And I think they'd be just far better off actually just investing in that region's network, so that actually the north of England has a decent, you know, cross, so not just going up and down, north and south,
but that's
east and west.
East and west
was the problem. And then far better spend the money there, decent Wi-Fi, and that could all be done at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
Of HS2, but of course it's all too late.
And
now.
everybody knows that the whole system is creaking, not least because of the people that operate it. You know, the drivers who are constantly, you know, either on strike or not available. You know, it seems rather pertinent to point out that on the first day of the nationalisation of South West Rail, the first train they put out that day under the new ownership was a replacement bus service. You know,
it's typical.
What can you do? Listen, we're going to talk to Donna Harvey in a minute over in America, because we need to get her take on what Donald Trump is saying in the White House, what he's doing, and what plans are being made by the National Security Council, who were meeting, I think, last night. Let's just talk.
it won't surprise you to hear that I agree with everything that Nigel Farage said there. And I think for me, the key thing that I want to hear from this government is that they will commit to delivering this inquiry and publishing the report before the next election, so that voters actually have a chance to decide who was to blame and whether they actually want to frankly exercise the only power they have, which is at the ballot box, to punish those people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 6:49 and we're here with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Susan says, morning, Mike. Comrade Starmer's greatest achievement, getting Nigel Farage elected Prime Minister. Thank you, Keith, says Susan in Worthing. Beck says, morning, Mike. Margaret currently in Tunisia. Starmer's only achievement is finally accepting that a woman is biologically female, but only after the court agreed with what the majority of us knew in the first place. Here's a voice note from Darren.
Morning, Mike. Darren, out here in Holland. Keir Darley. Greatest achievement since he took office. He's managed to wind me up every bleeding day. All right, have a good one. Bye.
Absolutely right. Dawn says, Starmer's greatest achievements, more lies told than anyone ever, alienating an entire population, becoming the most hated Prime Minister ever, and biggest loser in the polls. Well, nobody has ever been more unpopular. I think we had that story yesterday. He's even more unpopular than Gordon Brown was at the height of his unpopularity. Don't forget, coming up after this show ends at 10 o'clock, Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here, but you can also get the Morning Glory podcast, which comes out pretty much 15 minutes after the show. Very efficient, I have to say. Keep your eyes out for that. Don't forget, coming up later on today as well, Nigel Farage will be here. We'll take your questions to him if you want to send them in before he comes on. We'd be delighted to use them and ask him. Right now, though, Donna Harvey joins us. She's from Arizona now, KTAR in Phoenix, the Arizona Morning News. LaDonna, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you. We're sweltering under 115-degree temperatures here today, so be kind.
Yes, I'll be very kind. Well, we're similarly basking in what can only be described as the first proper week of summer, where it's for us in modern degrees Celsius, it was something like 31 the other day, and it was 28 yesterday. So very nice indeed, lovely. But it's hotting up in the Middle East as well. Let's have a quick look at Donald Trump talking on Air Force One about Iran.
Remember, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. We don't have to go too deep into it. They just can't have a nuclear weapon.
There's reports that you want to send the Vice President and Steve Witkoff to meet with the Iranians and have discussions. Is that something you're considering?
Not sure yet. I may. Depends on what happens when I get back.
What specifically is better than a ceasefire? What are you looking for here?
An end. A real end, not a ceasefire. An end.
An end. And he's also talks about a sort of unreconstructed, what do you call it? Not a ceasefire, but a complete and utter surrender by Iran, isn't it?
Unconditional.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's the view in America about all of this?
So, I mean, it's really interesting. If you look among lawmakers and even among those who support Donald Trump, you're finding a bit of a schism when it comes to what to do about Iran and what to do about their nuclear weapons. You have the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world, staunch Donald Trump supporter, saying that if anybody is slobbering, I believe was her term, to get into a war with Iran, then they didn't understand MAGA. They weren't MAGA, Make America Great Again. Ted Cruz, on the other hand, says, you know, you have to understand the implications of Iran having a nuclear weapon. There is a divide, because one of the things that Donald Trump ran on was the, endless wars, as he called them, in the Middle East, and the fact that he didn't want us involved. So it's a very strange dichotomy, and you add that to the fact that he apparently did not know or, was not apprised of what Israel was planning to do when it attacked Iran, but now seems to have embraced it. So it's a little bit difficult for MAGA supporters to kind of figure out I'm not really sure. We don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons because, well, the Ayatollah, and, but we also don't want to be involved.
Right.
So, there's a little bit of a schism there as to, what do you do and who do you support?
No, exactly right. But here in London this morning, the papers are all saying that an armada is sort of being put together by Trump in the Middle East. The USS Nimitz, along with its 9 squadrons of attack planes and an escort force, including 5 destroyers, has left the South China Sea to join the USS Carl Vinson strike group in the Arabian Sea. So there's definitely a kind of a mobilisation going on, isn't there, of all sorts of hardware.
Yeah, we're talking about a couple of nuclear aircraft carriers, a lot of planes that are headed that way as well. But the thing is, what we don't know as the American public is, what are they there for? Are they there just in case other Middle Eastern countries decide to get involved in this conflict and attack Israel? Are we there as a part of strikes on Iran? What is it exactly that we're doing? We really, as the American public, do not know as of yet, but that is a very large mobilization. Right. Aircraft carriers ain't small and they ain't cheap to move.
No, quite. And Trump has always sort of historically shied away from international conflict, hasn't he? He thinks that the people that voted for him, the MAGAs, if you like, of this world, don't really like interfering in foreign lands because of what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Right, and he is correct. There is a significant Republican move against becoming involved in anything in the Middle East. They look at it as a place that is going to burn for thousands of years because that just is the way the Middle East is, and there's nobody that can stop it but those who live in the Middle East, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of impetus there to do anything about it because hatred's just run too deep. Yeah. They are ugly and they are festering, and they have been for, I don't know, a few thousand years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how you sit down at a table with some people who want to destroy your country and kill you. I mean, you don't really do deals with people like that, generally speaking. You sort of have to kill them first. LaDonna, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. LaDonna Harvey there from Arizona's KTAR in Phoenix. Yeah, I mean, this will run and run, I guess, this story. We'll wait and see what happens. But again, an opportunity for the G7 to do something. But of course, the G7 now looks kind of redundant, doesn't it? Because they're sitting around without Trump. Trump has left, and they've got really no power.
And fundamentally, they have a different view. And you hit the nail on the proverbial head there, Mike, when you say, Iran, it comes down to the fact that Iran doesn't think that Israel has a right to exist. Right. And until Iran accepts that Israel has a right to exist and it's going to stop attacking Israel, and it's going to stop funding and supporting Hezbollah, well, it's mainly Hamas, Iran, and so forth, stop funding and supporting those organisations, proxies that are attacking Israel. It's very difficult to see how Israel can have, or the US can broker any sort of meaningful conversation. You played the clip there from Donald Trump on Air Force One, and he wasn't talking about a ceasefire. He just wants an end to the war, an end to the war, and that doesn't.
And maybe the only way that ends is to take out the man who's in charge of running it, who is, of course, the Ayatollah.
It's existential. It's either whilst and that's not at Israel's behest. That's at Iran's behest. Yeah. They continue to.
Israel would be very happy to live peacefully in their own land, as long as people stop attacking them.
And it did. And there was, if you think back before 1979, this was Iran was just a republic. It's now a theocracy. It's an Islamic Islamic theocracy, and as part of that, the approach taken by the regime in Tehran, it is hell bent on the destruction of the infidel.
Yes, absolutely right.
It may begin with the Jews, but this is all of our problem.
We've got a country full of Iranian spies. We know that they have malice aforethought towards the West. Yeah. We know that they've threatened Britain already in this particular latest conflict. We also know that some of the people coming over on small boats are Iranian defectors and or spies. We don't know what plans they have when they get here, but some of them have been arrested and charged with terrorist offences and all the rest of it. They're not a friendly country. I'd be all in favour of Trump taking them out. Yeah. Meanwhile, the end is nigh, but not as nigh as you thought, according to The Sun on page 22, because there's a lot of zeros here. I'm not even going to attempt to try and describe how many there are, but maybe you could do a better job.
I think there's 78, and it's down. So yes, this is scientists have come to the conclusion that it may be many billions of years, 78 zeros in terms of totting it up, before the final cosmic curtain will fall, and that would bring about the end of the world.
Yes,
I have a feeling that maybe it's nuclear war, that one of those two are going to get to us.
Yes.
One of those two are going to get to us before any of this happens.
But there's some good news. Chris Lintott, who's Professor of Astrophysics at Oxford University and presenter of the BBC Sky at Night programme, says there's no need to let the sooner-than-expected decay of the last stellar remnants get you down. Some cosmologists believe our universe might produce daughter universes so we can jump across to a reboot.
Oh, fantastic.
So there you are.
There we go.
You can just start again
and
somewhere else.
And it's an improvement on the fact that actually it's not as well. Previously, it was 1100 zeros.
Right.
How many billions of years
Right.
this before the end of the world?
We'll all be long gone by then, and so will Keir Starmer, no doubt. The only people interested in trains are you lot down south, says Andy from Notts. I haven't seen a train for the best part of 2 years. Maybe more. They didn't impact our life at all. Well, I don't know if that's true of people who live in Nottingham, but maybe that's the reason why you don't care about trains, because you can't get the train to go anywhere, because it doesn't go anywhere you want to go. But there we are. We'll talk more about trains and HS2 and the whole disaster that is. Theo Usher, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you soon. We'll be back coming up after this. Nigel Farage joins us. Plus, of course, all the news that you need and all the views that you don't hear anywhere else. I'm Mike Graham. This is Morning Glory. We'll see you after the news.
Five, four, three, two, one. Yay!
8722, start your message with the word talk. Who would you send to space and why?
The person I would love to send to space would be Mr. Keir Starmer. And then I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so many to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, so I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, do you get the job, yeah? Go on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what... There's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham, and it is, of course, Wednesday, the 18th of June. We are well into the week, and it has been another massive week, of course, for news. We are still recovering from the Baroness's report, Baroness Casey, which came out a couple of days ago on the rape gangs, of course. Keir Starmer still yet to say anything proper about it, yet to address the nation about what he thinks about it. He said before he left for the G7 in Canada, of course, that he was going to have a national inquiry, but that now is beginning to look a little bit less strong and a little bit more watered down. We'll be talking to Nigel Farage about that. He's a guest on the show coming up a little bit later on. Kate Hoey, the Baroness, is here as well. Independent peer, former Labour MP. We'll get her view on it. But there's clearly a massive cover-up that's been going on for decades and decades and decades, and we need to know the answers to the questions that we have been putting to all sorts of people over the past week, month, year. Because we know that Keir Starmer knew about this for at least a decade. We know that dozens and dozens of people in Parliament knew about it, particularly in the Labour Party. We know also that many councils up and down the country, from Telford to Oldham to Rotherham to Doncaster, even up to Edinburgh, were complicit in the trafficking of girls and children, let's face it, aged 13 and sometimes even younger, to Pakistani men who repeatedly raped them, gang raped them. We've got many victims who have spoken out, many very brave young women who are now waiving their anonymity and coming out and saying this needs to be dealt with, it needs to be dealt with once and for all, and it needs to be dealt with properly. That means people need to go to jail, people need to be held accountable, people need to be prosecuted. We need to hear from Keir Starmer. I'm telling you this morning, that he says this is going to happen. He needs to be very strong on this, otherwise he is in grave danger of completely blowing up whatever he thinks his regime is all about. He was asked yesterday, after coming up to almost a year in power, what was his biggest mistake?
In terms of mistakes, look, I think that we haven't always told our story as well as we should, explained our decisions in the way that might in retrospect have been better, but that's the nature of politics. I suppose the story at the end of the first year is this: we had to clear up the mess, and the first year was really about that. But as we now turn into the second year with the spending review, now's the time we can show that having cleared up that mess, taken those tough but necessary decisions, now you can see in the spending review, with the investment we're making in our public services, in our infrastructure, in our jobs, apprentices, you name it, you can see the difference that the Labour government makes.
Yeah, so he thinks they didn't get the messaging right. He thinks that they didn't really do very well in terms of explaining and communicating what they were doing. Well, I've got some very bad news for you, matey. You're the most unpopular Prime Minister that ever lived, and some of those hard decisions that you took have already been reversed. Absolutely ridiculous. Breaking news, inflation stays the same at around about 3.5%. So the economy is still struggling to go anywhere, to get anywhere, and to be anywhere. This is Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. We'll also be talking about the Trump Armada gathering in the Arabian Sea, because the USS Nimitz is along with 9 squadrons of attack planes and an escort force, including 5 destroyers, has left the South China Sea to join the USS Carl Vinson strike group in the Arabian Sea. And this is obviously with a plan to certainly intimidate, if not actually strike at Iran. Trump poised to join the war on Iran, is what it says on the front page of the Telegraph, front page of the Daily Mail. US poised to join the Iran war. He knows where Ayatollah is, but won't kill him for now. So we'll keep that one on the viewer, on the scope, just to see what's going on over the course of the next few hours. Let's get a voice note from James on Keir Starmer.
Morning, Mike. I've just seen that video that you've played of him. Is he mental? What is he talking about? We had to clear up the mess. Yeah, and make tough decisions. But you've U-turned on nearly all of those tough decisions. So if you had to make those decisions to clear up the mess, why have you U-turned them on? I said to you last Friday that my head was spinning from all the U-turns last week. And then it's only Wednesday. You cannot keep up with these idiots. They don't know what they're doing. They're all over the place. It's absolutely insane. It's like Alice in Wonderland, this stuff. It's absolutely nuts. Ridiculous.
And I mean, again, I'm afraid Keir Starmer, who loves to tweet, who loves to get out there on social media with his little videos of him walking around the G7, walking in the forest, you know, hugging Volodymyr Zelensky, talking about the dodgy roads in Britain, he hasn't addressed the 2 biggest stories of the week, which is, one, what on earth is going to happen in Iran, what is going to happen between Israel and Iran, and are we going to support Israel in their wish to eradicate the current leader of Iran to stop them from building a nuclear attack bomb, or is he going to call for a de-escalation and try and be all neutral about it because he doesn't want to show his sort of cohorts in the Labour government that he's pro-Israel? And he also hasn't mentioned anything about the grooming gangs report. Baroness Casey, who was commissioned by Keir Starmer to do the report, he has not actually said anything about it. Extraordinary. Let's talk to Baroness Kate Hoey. It's a hell of a way to run a country, Kate, isn't it? Very good morning to you.
Well, good morning, and yes, another U-turn apparently today, perhaps. No, I just laughed when I heard that bit about that it was the message. You know, they weren't communicating properly. I mean, how do you communicate better that you're going to get rid of the pensioners' winter fuel? You know, it is nonsense. And I think the more we're seeing of him, particularly the more we're seeing of him abroad, because that seems to be where he wants to spend a lot of his time. Yeah. I think there will be more and more rumblings within, you know, the Labour Party. I'm no longer a member, as you know, but I'm sure that there are a lot of MPs now feeling really disgruntled. And I'm not sure changing a leader will do much good, but I think it might make a lot of the MPs feel that there was something happening that was going to make a difference to their election result.
Well, exactly right, because there's a kind of relentlessness about the mistakes, isn't there? They keep making them, and every chance they get to do something right, they sort of somehow manage to screw it up. They somehow manage to get it wrong. I don't know who's advising them. People told me that Morgan McSweeney was this kind of, you know, genius in Downing Street, and if he's the guy in charge, I don't think he's really a genius, do you?
Well, there's certainly been a huge number of really... I'm sure someone like Alistair Campbell is probably tearing his hair out, although he wouldn't actually say so, but there's no doubt about it. They haven't got people around them who seem to be able to relate to what the public's thinking. You know, the public's view on these issues is so important. And no one, I mean, I'm just amazed that MPs are not taking back to Downing Street what they're hearing, you know, around, especially those Northern Labour MPs who must be hearing all the time that Keir Starmer is just hopeless. Yeah. But I've never been a supporter. I've never would have voted for him because I saw the way he behaved during the whole Brexit debate in the Parliament.
Right, and that's the problem. I mean, when you look back at his career, you know, and this has pertinence because when we talk about, you know, the grooming gangs and the report from Baroness Casey that came out this week, you know, he was the head of public prosecutions. He was the man in charge of the law, if you like, in this country, and he always refers to his time there, talks about how he knows about prosecuting terrorists and he knows about prosecuting bad guys and criminals and drug dealers, and he also talks about how he did prosecute, which he did, some of these rape gangs, but he prosecuted a lot fewer than his successor did because the numbers of prosecutions suddenly jumped when he left the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And so at the end of the day, you know, his sort of background and his character and his history feeds into everything about how he now operates, because he seems to be a man, we're told, who doesn't really take advice very well. He likes to read lots of legal documents and lots of, supposedly professional articles and trade magazines and all that sorts of things, and then sort of come to a conclusion, but almost without thinking, how will people see this conclusion and how will people relate to it if I say this?
Yeah, he can't ever get away from the fact that he is a lawyer and a lawyer first. And of course, when you look back at the whole issue of what he did in the Crown Prosecution Service, more and more seems to be coming out about how he didn't actually do as much as he could, certainly, to prosecute the gangs. And, you know, that's what is interesting, that he said so little even about the Casey report, because he should know more about it than almost anyone else, having been involved at very, very early stages. Yeah. So he may be waiting till he comes back. I presume he's back today. Now, whether he will be, asked then, I just hope. The media have been giving him up until recently a fairly easy time. Particularly the mainstream media, and I think that may be beginning to change now, and hopefully he'll get more pressure.
I think so. I mean, he hasn't said much, as I say.
He needs to come on your programme, Mike.
He does. But, I mean, he never has, right? I mean,
No.
we very rarely get graced by government presence. You know, I think we've had 4 or 5 government ministers since they've been in power last July, you know, which is about 1 every 2 months. And they consistently just don't bother coming on. And I can only assume it's either because they think I disagree with them, or they think I might be rude to them or horrible to them. I don't really care. You know, the bottom line is that, you know, whenever they do appear on other programmes, they look as if they're incompetent. You know, we've had 2 instances most recently, 2 ministers going on one of my rival programmes, you'll know the one I mean, not knowing their brief, you know, being asked about what monies were being spent, they didn't know, asked about, you know, there was John Healey asked about how many submarines he built, he didn't know, how much do they cost, he didn't know that, you know, same goes for the woman who was trying to talk about...
Yes, I thought that one about the infrastructure, not knowing where the, you know, where the
Thames crossing was, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Emma Reynolds, was that? Yeah, I mean, it's just hopeless, you know. So, I mean, if they came on, and it's just pathetic. But let's have a look. Beth Rigby managed to catch up with him for Sky just last night, I think. And this is him talking about his biggest achievement. Check this out.
Amongst the things, I could do a whole list, but I'm really proud that a year ago, probably, I was interviewed by you and I said we'd do 2 million extra appointments in the NHS in the first year of a Labour government. We've now done 3 million and waiting lists are coming down. There's a whole list of other things that I could probably go on about for a very, very long time.
Well, I don't think he could go on about it for a very long time, actually. I don't know about you, but I can't think... I've been asking people what his greatest success is, and most people are saying, you know, trashing the economy, you know, ruining business and basically messing up the country and being the most unpopular Prime Minister of all time. You know, and by the way, his constant mantra of bringing in appointments in and bringing a waiting list down is not true, because I hear from people every single day who have appointments cancelled, who have appointments moved, and then they sort of move them from one waiting list to another waiting list. So there's plenty of appointments being made, but then they're all being cancelled.
Yes, no, I think you're right, and this again would be being fed back to him, or should be being by local MPs. But I mean, his biggest issue, I think, at the moment, apart from, you know, obviously what's happening in Iran and how that might affect us, but is immigration. And you know, you cannot find anyone now who is saying even the things that were being said a year ago about, you know, all these you know, poor asylum seekers coming in by boat, and we must be nice to them. I mean, it really is getting to a stage where it is a national emergency. And I don't know what more he's going to do, but this idea that they're going to sort of get the French to do more when we're paying him all this money. But of course, Macron's coming to visit, you see, and they'll have to have something big to announce when Macron comes. But whether it actually will work or make any difference, the only way we're going to stop the boats is to make it very clear that anyone who comes in on those boats who is not there, who is not here legally, will be deported and sent back. And France has to agree to take people back.
Yes, but they seem to have only agreed when they were together in Canada in the last couple of days that if the crisis is actually getting worse. That seems to be the only agreement they've made. They've sort of agreed that it's all going down the gurgler, and they don't really know what to do about it.
No, and there's this idea that you know, the police will be able to actually go into the water and stop the boats. I mean, I had assumed that when we were paying them all those millions of pounds, that they could be able to do that, and it sounds like legally they weren't even allowed to do that.
No. Apparently,
we should be asking.
Apparently, apparently the union.
But say we should be asking for our money. We should be asking for our money back.
Yeah, absolutely right. They're doing nothing. They've never done anything. And I mean, you can't really blame the French in a way, because the French don't want them either. And I mean, if you can imagine if we had a load of migrants leaving our shores for France, I don't think we'd be stopping them, would we?
Well, it would be making it very, very difficult for. But Mike, you know, the real issue we've talked about before, the pull issue. Every one of those young men, mainly young men, will say they want to come to the United Kingdom, and when they're pushed by various journalists that have done, you know, it is because they know they're going to be well looked after.
Of course.
You know, they're just coming into being treated better. I was horrified to discover, and I think it's reported now in I think perhaps the Daily Telegraph today, that Kent Council was actually paying for them to have free television licenses. Now, I mean, that is outrageous when our elderly have been stopped getting free television licenses. It's just shocking.
And down in Folkestone, and we know this because we covered the story a few months ago, they're getting free driving lessons. They're getting access to taking driving tests, which, of course, if you have got a teenage son or daughter, which many people tell me about, and I've had the problem as well, you can't get a test.
You have to wait.
You have to wait months and months and months and hope for a cancellation. But these guys are getting sort of fast-tracked. And that's where I think people in Britain have decided they've had enough because, you know, we're a pretty tolerant race, by and large, in this country, and we will put up with an awful lot. But when it looks as though people are coming to this country and getting advantages that we can't have, and ordinary people are struggling with their weekly shopping bills, their electricity bills, you know, everything's going up in price, and yet here are these people coming into the country and getting handed stuff for free.
Yes, and I think also what people are seeing is, you know, the real change in their environment, in their particularly in areas where they're, you know, more rural areas where some of the migrants are being sent. It does change the whole way people see and live. I've seen it in Northern Ireland now, where more and more migrants are being sent over here, and you know. They're young men, they're walking around. Yes, maybe many of them are not doing anything wrong, but it's unsettling for a lot of people who've suddenly seen this change to their local streets.
Right. Yeah, because it's noticeable now, because the numbers, sheer numbers, are just huge. I mean, when you and I started talking in the sort of post-Brexit referendum years of 2017, 2018, seems like a decade ago now, it almost is. You know, the immigration problem was nothing like this. You know, when Boris Johnson got in 2019, he promised to bring net migration down to 20,000 a year. You know, and now we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people every single year.
Yes, no, it is out of control, and of course, I mean, legal migration too needs to be looked at, but I think it's just the fact that you see these boats now, and I remember I mentioned it when I was on once before. I went down to see some of the boats arriving a couple of years ago. That was when there weren't so many coming, and it was pretty horrifying, really, just to see these gangs of young men coming in.
Yeah, because they are, you know, intimidating. And if you're standing on the street corner and there are gangs of young men walking around or hanging about, regardless of whether they're not doing anything wrong technically, they are changing the facade of the nation. And people have just had enough. And this morning, you know, we see in the Telegraph, foreign nationals are responsible for what looks like about a third of sex attacks on women in the last year alone, you know.
And that is not surprising in one way, in that so many of them are coming from countries where women were not treated in any way with respect or with equality. And so they come here and they don't have our, you know, it sounds awfully glib these days, but they don't have our values. They don't have our attitudes to women that we take for granted, and therefore they're bound to be in a situation where there's groups of them hanging around. Certainly it makes a lot of young women and women generally feel fearful, whether they're talking to, you know, where people are that are going to attack them or anything. Of course, probably the majority will not be doing that, but it's the fear that arises in people when you see statistics like this.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Kate, great to see you back. Thank you very much indeed. Baroness Kate Hoey. We'll talk some more very soon. Independent peer and former Labour MP. Let's get a voice note from Andy on the far right bandwagon.
Hello, Mike. Hello, Theo. Andy in Portsmouth. Yeah, listening to Keir Starmer being interviewed by Beth Rigby there. It's the same old story with him. Can never answer a question. He's such an arrogant narcissist, in my opinion. And I don't think he'll ever change. If he'd have just said, yeah, all right, at the time I used clumsy language, whatever, I regret it now, at least people will think he's got a tiny bit of credibility, but he's never going to change in my book. So as far as I'm concerned, he's still a useless PM.
Yeah. Well, I think many people, most people in fact, would agree with you. This from Elle in Staffordshire. I'm sick to the back teeth of this bleeding Prime Minister making statements of utter BS. He is a condescending, smug, compulsive liar. He is weak. His non-existent response to the casing report is total denial and disrespectful to victims and us. He has brought shame on our country. The world is watching and laughing. This will and should be the hill he dies on politically. I think that's a very strong message, I think, and we should pass that one on to him. Morning, Mike, says Margaret in Birmingham. Starmer getting more deluded by the day. His biggest achievement has been the worst PM we have ever had. What a plonker. Well, Rodney, 7:22.
which is based in this false notion that no matter where you come from on the globe, you have every right to be in the United Kingdom. Doesn't matter if you're from the backwaters of the deepest Punjab and you've never, come within walking distance of a school. You should be welcome in the United Kingdom. And it doesn't matter whether you hate the country, whether you hate our culture, whether you hate our people, you should be welcome in the United Kingdom. This is the foundational building blocks of their political philosophy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 7:24. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here. Rob in Lincoln says, Starmer makes Boris Johnson look like Mother Teresa with all his claptrap and lies. Great show, thank you. Martin says, Starmer's greatest achievement is assembling a bunch of talentless, inept, hypocritical people for his cabinet. And Michelle from Altrincham says, Keir Starmer's biggest achievement, barefaced lying to the taxpayer while grinning like he's just solved world peace. If fibs were currency, we'd all be millionaires by now. Well, this is the problem, of course, and as I said, he hasn't really commented on the two biggest stories of the week so far since he's been at the G7. One, the Baroness Casey report into rape gangs and what actual propensity there is to put together a proper panel of people who will actually totally and properly investigate what happened. You know, it's all very well announcing there's going to be a national inquiry, but it's beginning to look like that's now going to be watered down to quite a large extent. And it may well be that some individuals in the public sector, whether they be prosecutors or councillors or police, might even be exempt from prosecution. We're not sure. We're checking into all that. But what we need to hear from, surely, from Keir Starmer, is how he's going to prepare this investigation, how he is going to put an inquiry together. Because he said nothing about it so far. We don't even know who's going to lead it. And we don't even know what powers it's going to have. And I think we do need to know all of those things. Also, he hasn't mentioned what's happening in Iran, because he's frightened of not showing support for Israel, and he's also frightened of showing support for Israel. And that is the problem. James Cartledge is here, Shadow Defence Secretary. James, very good morning to you.
Always a pleasure, Mike. Good morning to you too.
Yes, good to see you. I know we're going to talk in a minute about Homes for Heroes and some new government policy, but do you not find it a bit strange that despite the fact that Keir Starmer's at the G7, he hasn't actually said anything about Donald Trump's readiness for war, about the movement of aircraft carriers and heavy artillery and planes into the Arabian Sea? Hasn't said anything about what the RAF's deployment is, what we're doing. You know, we don't really know anything.
I think you put it very well earlier. I mean, look, John Healey, to be fair, at the military conference yesterday in London, did say that our RAF Typhoons were in place so that we could support allies if needed. It basically gives us more options. But I think it's pretty clear that the US are now considering their options. I don't want to speculate on what they're going to do, but it's obvious that you mentioned there's been reports of certain capabilities being brought into position. The key issue for all of us, I think, which is incredibly serious, is that Iran is a country which has supported proxy movements like the Houthis, who directly attacked our own naval ships in the Red Sea. And it's not speculation, they attacked our own naval ships. This country, with its propensity to support terrorism, is clearly developing a nuclear capability. We heard from the atomic inspectors last week that they have an unprecedented level of uranium enrichment for a non-nuclear armed state. That tells us one thing, so you can understand now why the Israelis feel the need to defend themselves.
Yes, absolutely right. Let's talk a bit about what you're announcing today, new Homes for Heroes policy. You want to help armed forces families get on the housing ladder.
Absolutely, and it's something I feel very strongly about. When I was Minister for Defence Procurement, I was responsible for the defence estate. I was very open that the quality of the accommodation for our armed forces, these are the people we asked to defend our country, was nothing like good enough. My conclusion was very simple. The structure of those homes meant you couldn't just keep throwing money at them. You had to rebuild the whole estate, and that meant we had to take back ownership of it. It was sold off in 1996. I did all the the work so that we could buy back the defence estate, a deal which was in progress at the election and actually legally concluded under Labour. So I'm really pleased we've brought back the defence estate. But having done that, how exactly are we going to deliver a new estate so that we do deliver those homes for heroes? What I'm announcing today is that if we were in government, we would set up an Armed Forces Housing Association. This would have representation on its board from those who serve in the armed forces, but above all it would be there to coordinate this change so that finally those who serve get the homes that they deserve.
Yes, because it is time, isn't it, that we did more for our own armed services. We had the former head of the SAS in here just last week, who's now heading up We Served, which is a great organisation. I don't know whether you've had any dealings with them, but they're all talking about getting armed forces servicemen and women into the sort of the commercial sector once they leave as well.
Mike, the key thing is what worries me is the retention figures.
Yeah.
Now, retention in the military is an issue for many of our NATO allies, and it was an issue when we were in government. But already the armed forces are 1,000 smaller since the election. So it's a very serious issue. And if you look, there was a survey in May, the number one issue why people are thinking of leaving the armed forces is because of the pressure on family life. And my view is, if we had better quality housing, so we're not just talking about physically better homes that don't get damp and mould and so on, we are talking about a proper rebuild so people feel like they have a better quality of life. And finally, the option to get onto the housing ladder as well, because the good thing about housing associations, they offer a housing product called part-by-part rent. I think if this was offered to members of the armed forces, we could extend home ownership not just to the officers who generally, it's about 74% of them are on the property ladder, but to the junior ranks as well, and I think that'd be really good for social mobility, and so that's why we're announcing this policy today.
Yeah, and just going back to our sort of defence and readiness, if you like, piece in the FT today, Rachel Reeves giving an interview to them saying basically defence spending will not rise beyond 2.6% of GDP until the next Parliament. Well, it seems to be a total kind of revolt face, if you like, on what they said in the review, talking about the defence review the week before last, where they said they were going to move it up to 3.5% in the next Parliament.
Well, two really good points, Mike. I mean, first of all, you're absolutely right. The authors of the report, who were independent, were very clear on the day it was published. It was predicated on spending 3%.
Yeah.
And we know from the spending review there's no plan to go beyond 2.6%, as you say. But by the way, it's not even 2.6. In fact, it's not even 2.5. That 2.6% figure comes about because of smoke and mirrors. The government have added a whole load of spending to the defence budget, which is just from other departments. That is not new spend. The country are not foolish. They know what we've got to do with the threats we face is actually buy new equipment. We've got to rearm our ships when they go back to the Red Sea. I want them to have the missiles on them that can defend them from the threats they face. We've got to do these things urgently, whereas there's no pace with this government. They're not committing the finances. Our defences are not stronger, so they can have all the conferences they want, and there's one ongoing in London right now, and say all the things they want. But we need money to buy this stuff, and at the moment they're not putting it into defence, and that's where the country wants to see us putting our resources so we can defend ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely right, particularly in this current situation that we see in the Middle East. One final one for you, James. Keir Starmer's been talking about coming up to a year in government, what his greatest achievements are and what his greatest mistake was. He basically said he thinks his greatest mistake was not communicating what he was doing perhaps as well as he could have done. What do you think his greatest mistake has been?
Like, there's no direction, there's no leadership. I mean, you mentioned earlier, just before I came on air, about the grooming gangs inquiry.
Yeah.
Yet another U-turn. We had that on Winterfield. It's not obvious what he stands for. And if you don't have that leadership from the centre, whether you agree with a Prime Minister or not, if you don't have that leadership, you won't get effective government. And I think particularly worrying today, you know, the cost of living is still an issue. Inflation is still quite high. It was 2% at the election. It's 3.4%. That's because they're directionless. What we need is strong leadership, particularly on defence. We're just not getting it. Labour are letting down the British people.
James Carthage MP, thank you very much indeed. Shadow Defence Secretary, talking there about Keir Starmer's greatest achievements and greatest successes, and also his greatest failures. He doesn't think he's had any real failures. He just thinks he didn't communicate his successes terribly well. Ian from Liverpool says, Starmer's achievement, turning Prime Minister's questions into Prime Minister not answering questions. One from Paul, who says, Labour's gaslighting lies in two examples. A couple of months ago, they announced they had built the first of 4 new planned prisons in 6 months. This prison, HMP Millsike, is that right, was built and virtually completed under the Tories. And Sizewell C nuclear power station was also underway before Labour came into government. The problem is that the lies that they're telling, I think, is what's getting people down. Chris in Croydon says, Mike, if I go to Spain, I pay up to €10 per room per night. Tourist tax, it's up to €15 in Greece. It's nothing here. Why don't we introduce this and ensure all the money goes into the hospitality industry administered by them and not the clown Reeves? Well, yeah, I'm not against a tourist tax at all. I mean, London right now, and every single day you seem to see them, is absolutely overrun with tourists. There's thousands of them. You know, I don't know where they're finding the money from, but there's loads of tourists coming here. Americans, Japanese, people from China, people from Europe, all over the world. People come to London because they love coming to see wherever it is that they think the king lives, or wherever it is they think the parliament is. They love the history. They love the sort of the food. They love the markets. They love so much about London. And if we simply charge them, even if 5% bed tax in all of the hotels that they're all staying in, or in the Airbnbs, wherever they are, it would make such a difference. It really would. Let's get a voice note from Bridget.
Good morning, Mike. Bridget in France here. Great show as always. I think what Keith Stalin has done for the British people, the best thing he's done is to show them why they should never, ever, ever be a Labour government in power in Britain ever again.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that, really. Here's Mike. Mike says, filling in commentary rather, just listening to Starmer the Harmer spouting on about now they've made the hard decisions, things are getting better, basically. I'm really, really worried. He actually believes what he's saying, doesn't he? Really scary. Keep up the great work. Well, one of the things he says is his greatest achievement is bringing down the waiting list in the NHS, which is not true. He says that not only have they created 2 million more appointments, they've created 3 million more appointments. Well, they may well have done, but those appointments are not being honoured. You know, we'll take your NHS examples today just to prove him wrong, because I think that would be a nice birthday present for him come July the 4th. You know, because you know as well as I do, what I've been saying for months is that the NHS waiting lists are being messed about with. There's a lot of jiggery-pokery going on, a lot of smoke and mirrors, sleight of hand, whatever you want to call it. They're moving people from one waiting list to another. They're making new appointments for people, yes. And maybe they have made 3 million more appointments, but I bet most of them were cancelled because people are not seeing doctors. They're not seeing occupational therapists. They're not seeing the people whose appointments they're being made to see, because those appointments get cancelled like a week or 2 weeks or a month before you're supposed to see them. Unbelievable stuff. Don't forget, coming up in the next hour, Nigel Farage is going to join us. If you've got any questions for him or anything that you'd like me to ask him, by all means, let me know. You can text us on 87222. You can find us on Talk or X, if you like, at talkTV. And, of course, send us a voice note, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk. Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:37. I'm Mike Graham with you, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock when Julia's here. Sue from Chelmsford says, Mike, it's interesting to compare how the government treat foreign young males trafficked into our country and how they are treated, and how young British girls who have been raped and trafficked within our own country are treated. The foreign young males get put up in hotels and flying lessons get given to them, whereas the young British girls have been strip searched and treated as criminals. Absolutely shameful. Yeah, we'll be addressing all of that when Nigel Farage is here. He's coming up just about 8 o'clock. o'clock, just after 8 o'clock. So we'll look forward to that. Phil has got a voice note for us on Keir Starmer's greatest achievement.
Good morning, Mike. Phil from Nottingham. There is a Keir Starmer greatest achievement. There is one. The fact that he's still Prime Minister. God only knows how he's done that.
Yeah, sadly. We're all suffering at the yoke of that, aren't we? Let's talk to Elon Levy, though. He's here, former Israeli government spokesperson, host of Israel State of a Nation podcast. Elon, very good morning to you.
Hello, good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much for joining us. Things seem to be ratcheting up a bit in the Middle East. Trump poised to join war in Iran, the headlines I'm seeing here in London today. Trump's Armada, quite a big movement of a carrier strike force from the South China Sea up to join USS Carl Vinson in the Arabian Sea. Threats from Donald Trump saying to the Ayatollah, we know where you are, we won't kill you yet. So it looks as though America is preparing for something, doesn't it?
Yeah, things are ratcheting up. Israel is giving the Iranian regime a bloody nose. President Trump loves the winner, and it looks like he's considering whether to give the death blow to the Iranian nuclear weapons program by mobilizing those B-2 bombers, possibly to destroy Fordo, the Iranian secret illegal nuclear weapons program underneath a mountain. It's difficult to overstate just how well Israel is doing in this war with Iran. Overnight, Iran fired 25 ballistic missiles at Israel. There were 0 casualties. Right. Israel sent 50 fighter jets over Iran to destroy their centrifuges, and it lost 0 planes. And I think President Trump understands exactly what the Chancellor of Germany said yesterday, which is what every Western leader is thinking, but no one has the guts to say. Chancellor Merz said that Israel is doing the world's dirty work for it. Because if it weren't for Israel's military operation against the Iranian nuclear weapons program, then the regime that has sown so much death and destruction in the Middle East would be on course to get nuclear weapons. And now Germany is signaling that if Iran doesn't back down, it's possible Germany might support this effort too.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with you. I'm surprised that Western leaders are not saying anything. I mean, I've been having a go at Keir Starmer this morning. He said nothing really about what's going on over the skies of Iran or on the ground in Israel at all since he's been at the G7. The G7 seems to me, since Donald Trump left, to be a bit of a toothless kind of beast, really.
Look, I would expect Britain to take a much firmer stance against the Islamic Republic of Iran because it's an enemy state. Because the UK has said the Iranian regime is constantly trying to sow political violence in the UK to carry out assassinations. Its proxy forces have been attacking British ships in the Red Sea. This is a regime that leads crowds in chants not only of death to America and death to Israel, but death to England as well. And I suspect, it may be unpopular with the Labour base, but Keir Starmer knows here that Israel is doing the UK a massive service at huge risk to itself by taking on our common enemies.
Yeah, and that is the problem, isn't it? That you would expect Britain to be a much stronger ally to Israel, and it's been very disappointing for me personally, although my own personal thoughts are not particularly important on the general world stage. But I've been really disappointed in Britain's lack of support for Israel and quite often actual straight out hostility.
Look, I think it's clear that Britain has an interest in supporting Israel's efforts to destroy the Iranian nuclear weapons program and ballistic missile program. This is not the time to give the Iranian regime a lifeline and give it another chance to drag out talks while racing towards a nuclear weapon. But I think you're seeing in the UK the result of years of vicious propaganda against Israel on the side of Hamas, which have convinced so many people in the UK that Israel isn't a Western democratic country and an ally of the UK, but it's evil. And if Israel is evil, then why are you going to try to help it? And it has addled people's brains because it's clear that the Iranian regime that has impoverished its people and subjugated the Middle East to pursue its goal of nuclear weapons and controlling the region is an enemy of the United Kingdom, and the UK really should say what Western leaders are all thinking, but no one is saying outright that they really want Israel to give the Iranian regime a bloody nose and finish this once and for all.
And what, as far as you're aware, is the attitude of some of the other Gulf states? Because, I mean, I think secretly, certainly Saudi and the UAE wouldn't be unhappy about Iran being attacked.
That publicly they're condemning Israel, but that's to be expected. Privately, they're relieved. The Saudis and Emiratis were just as worried about an Iranian nuclear bomb as Israel. And they've also come under attack from the Iranian regime's proxy armies like the Houthis. So privately, they're relieved that Israel is neutralizing this threat to them. And they know that once the Iranian regime can no longer sow terror in the Middle East, that opens the gateways to more peace and normalization agreements in the Middle East without Iran able to get in the way. I only wish they had the courage and the integrity to say out loud what everyone knows they're saying in private.
Yes, absolutely right. Elon, thanks very much indeed. Elon Levy, the former Israeli government spokesperson and host as well of Israel State of a Nation podcast. A bit of breaking news this morning, if you missed it earlier. Inflation is down by 0.1%. It's pretty much stayed the same, really. It was at 3.5%. It's now at 3.4%, they're saying. So basically, it's as you were. Already, the country has been downgraded by the CBI from 1.5% next year growth to 1%. So there's still not much going on when it comes to the Chancellor of the Exchequer's department. Roy says this morning, Mike, great show, but some good news will be great if you can find anything from the last 12 months. An easy question for Nigel. Why do all the parties prefer the first past the post system that can give parties a huge majority and a lot of votes mean absolutely nothing? On the subject of Keir Starmer's greatest achievement since he's been in office, Starmer's biggest achievement has been to boost the popularity of the Reform Party, says Johnny. Starmer's greatest achievement is being in power for nearly a year without answering a single question, says Andrew. Absolutely, completely correct. And people are just getting sick to the back teeth of what he keeps saying about the NHS. Dave says this in Hull. On Ray Hospital waiting list, I was told in February that I needed an urgent heart scan. I had an appointment last month where I was told that I definitely needed an urgent scan and that it will be another 3 months. Imagine how long you have to wait for a non-urgent scan. Well, that's a very good point. Well, as I said, I hear stories day after day after day from my friends, from my family, from other people who I hear from on this very radio show and this very talk show, that they get appointments made and then they get appointments cancelled. Keir Starmer's claiming that he's had 3 million more extra appointments made since he became Prime Minister. Deluded doesn't begin to tell you what's going on because they're doing it deliberately. They're actually obfuscating, they're actually telling untruths, they're actually telling lies to the public. And that, I think, is one of the things that I think will never be forgiven. Paul in Chislehurst says, regarding the immigrants who are having driving lessons paid for them, how are they affording to pay for their insurance? Is that also on the British taxpayer? What about road tax? And how about the car, or more likely the moped? So many questions. Well, yeah, so many questions. And Keir Starmer won't answer any of them. Nigel Farage is here, though. He will answer your questions and my questions as well, coming up after the news at 8 o'clock. Next, though, we're going to talk about the Keir Starmer missing scenario, because he should be talking back here about the grooming gangs report. Baroness Casey came up with it a couple of days ago. We still haven't really heard properly from Keir Starmer about it. This is Talk.
But a woman should be prosecuted if there's no reason to end her pregnancy, not for her life, not for the baby or the disability. And lots of people disagree with that, I understand, but that's my position. It seems to me that a woman should be prosecuted. If you bought your baby at 7 or 8 months and there's no medical reason for that, yes, I think you should be prosecuted. But I would like you stigmatised. I think you're a baby killer.
I think, Julia, I guess language like baby killer is also very unhelpful.
Well, you're killing a baby. I think baby killer is a reasonable phrase to use.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is...
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:48. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. We are here every single weekday morning, 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory, plus the podcast. If you miss any of it, or you tell your friends they can't tune in, don't worry, just get the podcast. It comes out around about 10:15 every single weekday morning after this show finishes. Nigel Farage is coming in very shortly. He'll be here just after the news at 8 o'clock. Sean says this in Gloucester. Morning, Mike. How disgusting that politicians are playing politics with rape victims. They should all be ashamed and put politics aside for once in their life. Darren says from Coningsby, Keir has achieved something, a massive increase on boat arrivals. Well, let's talk now to John Peacocks, the former Detective Chief Inspector, CEO of Safe and Free. He himself was involved in some investigations back in the day in Oldham and Bradford. He came across 2 occasions of systemic abuse of young girls, but was repeatedly told to cover up the case so as not to inflame racial tensions. Let's have a look. John, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Tell us what happened. You now run a charity with 2 of the victims, and this national inquiry must have at least come as some good news to you and to them. But tell us what happened back in the day in Oldham and Bradford.
Well, I was a serving police officer in Manchester at the turn of the millennia, just around that time, maybe just slightly before. I can't remember the exact year, but I was in uniform, and we had problems with one of the local children's home where children were constantly going missing, and they were out of control and they were doing damage to the property, and the staff felt that there was nothing they could do to control them. My officers were there all the time, and it just seemed to be a massive waste of their time and a problem that they seemed incapable of resolving. So I decided to go and try and figure out what was going on and see if we could work it out. When I was there, the staff told me that the children were, would damage the place, do whatever they wanted, and there was nothing that they could do, which didn't seem appropriate. The places were being wrecked. And at the same time, the children would then walk out of the home any time of night or day, get in cars, and they specifically mentioned with Pakistani males, and then they wouldn't come back, sometimes for days. They were, as far as they were concerned, these children were being sexually exploited, and I said, well, this is ridiculous. We can do something about it. I said to them, the first thing we'll do, the next time one of your children starts smashing the place up and you can't deal with it, call me, and we'll take the child into the police station and keep them there until they've calmed down, and we'll bring them back and they can apologise to you. And that was the very first thing that we did, and we did that within literally a few days. And the child stayed in the police station for a couple of days with us. They were very concerned that we were going to criminalise the children. I said, not at all. We're going to release them without charge as soon as they've calmed down and come back to you. So we did that. It was a bit controversial, a bit unusual. Controversial and very unusual. The second thing I said we were going to do was I was going to go around to all the local mosques, and I was going to secure the support of the imams, and I was going to tell them that if they continue to do if people continue to do that, they would be arrested for abducting children and keeping them from care. I went out with that strong message and spoke to a number of imams who all pledged support. To be fair, they said that they would preach on it and send that message out. I said that if they were found, we would make sure that the publicity of the world was glaring at them and they would know about it. So and the message went out. Within a few weeks, a man was arrested, bringing with a child in his taxi, but it wasn't a paid fare, and there was no rational explanation for why this child would be there. So they both came to the police station. It's a place of safety. The child wouldn't say anything to us at all, wouldn't speak to us, tell us what was going on, and the taxi driver made no comment interviews. So I sent the officer back to the children's home and said, get a statement. If they say that this taxi driver shouldn't have had this child with her, I'll charge abduction. But the staff had told us that they wouldn't give a statement, and when I pushed this with my officers, they told me that they'd been told that they weren't to cooperate any longer with our inquiry because it wasn't in the best interest of the children or something of that nature.
And did they indicate who had told them that?
No, they didn't. They didn't. I mean, we never got another call back about the children kicking off in the care home. But there were, I imagine it was to do with the fact that they didn't like the intense level of input that we were, doing into the children's care home. Okay, so look, that's a management decision for the children's care home, and I walked away, licked my wounds, and wasn't thinking too much about it. But my boss came over to me and said, "John, about this pet project that you're doing, you do realise you've got some really important, you measured on specifics, burglaries, robberies, the speed of response, etc. You cannot let your standards slip. Make sure. I'm not going to tell you not to carry on with your pet project." Is a way he described it, which I felt was which carried all the messages that I needed to know.
Right.
But you can carry on with your pet project, but you better not let your standards slip. And I said, "Don't worry, my standards are fine, thank you."
Yeah.
But
that was obviously a very clear warning that he didn't think what you were doing was very important.
Well, I'm not sure that. I'm not sure what he thought, but it seemed like he was giving me permission not to do what I felt was important, and I just found that really strange, especially as it was timed to coincide with the response that we received from the children's care home, and so I can only conclude actually that he was in fact partnerships, so he would have been responsible for subdivisional partnerships. I can only conclude that he'd got that message from somewhere. He certainly hadn't got it from me, and it was the same message that the children's care home had received. And I don't know what their message was, but it seemed to me like both of us received gentle, get back into line messages from our management.
Right. And clearly that's what happened in an awful lot of different police stations up and down the country, because that seems to have been the case in Telford, certainly the case in Rotherham, certainly the case, as you say, in Oldham and Bradford. Have you got any confidence that this new commissioned national inquiry will actually look into that kind of detail?
Well, I think the issue is exactly the one you've just raised. I mean, as far as I was concerned, I was dealing with maybe not a completely unique problem, but a local problem.
Yeah,
it was a local problem at my local care home. I wasn't sure what the other care homes were like. Maybe some of the others were bad as well. But if you go higher up the tree, there were people in my organisation that knew that this wasn't just one care home. That this was every care home. So actually, the people higher up that tree should be thinking a different problem-solving approach. I'm thinking of a local problem-solving approach. I'm prepared to ride roughshod over community feelings and upset people for a local solution. But actually, it needed a bigger solution than that. And it's not just then at my force level, because it goes across organisations into the social services and into the other organisations that are at play there. There was a kind of, an understanding, organisational, operational understanding. I remember going to a multi-agency public protection meeting, which I was deputising for my one of my for the normal police representative at, and amongst the subjects that were talked about was a 15-year-old girl who had settled down with her boyfriend, a 21-year-old man, who was now living with him, and the NHS and were saying, well, we need to get contraception and make sure that she's not got STIs, and I said, but wait, hang on a minute, this is a 15-year-old girl, and she's with a bloke who I mean, I'm not. It's not relevant what his culture was,
right,
but it's a different culture.
Yeah.
But that's not really relevant in this case. She was a 15-year-old girl, and he was a man, and he'd got her living in his apartment. And I was told, well, you don't understand. This is the first time she's had a stable relationship, and we can't interfere with inquiries like that because it would cause the child enormous upset and concern. Now, life's complicated and it's difficult, but when you allow yourself to hide behind great big screens of convenience like that, then things don't happen organisationally.
Yeah.
And these problems, Mike, all contribute to the malaise that's affected us. We'll turn away from it and not look, because it's too difficult to solve.
Right, and then you miss much
higher levels.
Yes, and you miss much bigger problems which are going on at every level as well. John, listen, great to talk to you. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon. John Pecos there, former Detective Chief Inspector, now CEO of Safe and Free. So you heard it right there from the horse's mouth. A former police officer was basically warned off from looking into why lots of young girls who were basically children in care homes were being abducted by taxi drivers, Pakistani taxi drivers, taken away from the care home, sometimes for days on end. A young woman, a girl of 15, who was living with a man. Nothing was done. The police didn't want to know. The police warned him off from actually working on what they referred to as his pet project. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Final couple of suggestions on Keir Starmer. Keep them coming, though. His finest achievement, Tim says, Starmer still being Prime Minister is his greatest achievement. Absolutely useless. And Mike from Keith in the Philippines, Starmer's greatest achievement, picking up Donald Trump's papers. He did that really well. Ha ha. And Mark in Norfolk, I think Starmer's greatest achievement in 11 months is turning my lifelong Labour voting brother into a Reform voter. Well, Nigel Farage will be pleased to hear that. He's coming up next, right here on Talk. We'll see you after the news. Talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as a family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime.
Talk across the UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to 3 minutes past 8. It is Wednesday the 18th of June. It's a beautiful, beautiful summer's day out there. The weather is absolutely glorious, which of course only means one thing. There's going to be a lot more migrants coming across the channel. There's pictures in the papers today. I'm struggling to find anybody female or indeed childlike. They all seem to be young men clambering onto dinghies, being watched by the French, who are doing absolutely nothing to stop them. It's a very familiar scene, one that my next guest has been seeing and working on for the best part of 5 years, possibly 10 years. Nigel Farage is here. Very good morning, Nigel.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for coming in and joining us. We're going to have Nigel here for quite some time. If you've got any questions for him, by all means send them in and we will put them to him. We will be talking, of course, about the Baroness Casey report, the grooming gangs report, which has come out now 2 days ago. Keir Starmer still really to make any kind of statement about it at all. He gave some information to a couple of journalists who happened to be travelling with him in Canada yesterday, but he hasn't really addressed how this commission is going to be set up, how this independent investigation is going to be run, who's going to run it, exactly what powers they're going to have, and exactly who is going to be fingered, if you like, for whatever it was that they did or didn't do. The cover-up is massive. We just spoke to a former police officer there who just said on this very show that he was warned off for investigating a care home in Oldham where young girls at the age of 13 or 14 or 15 were being taken away, abducted by Pakistani men in taxis. The police said, don't bother with that. They called it a pet project. They said, don't bother doing it. Unbelievable. 0344 499 1000. We're also talking about Iran. Donald Trump is sending carriers from the South China Sea into the Arabian Sea, ratcheting up, saying that the Ayatollah will live for now, but we might be taking him out very, very soon. Obviously, the British forces are involved. Keir Starmer, once again, silent, completely nothing to say about the Gulf crisis and what's going on between Israel and Iran, for fear, of course, of upsetting this cohort of anti-Semites in the Labour Party who don't want to see him supporting Israel in any way, shape or form. 0344 499 1000. He was asked by Beth Rigby last night what he felt his biggest mistake was. Let's have a listen.
You accuse politicians like Badenoch of jumping on a bandwagon for the far right. Was that misjudged to put it in those terms? Do you wish you hadn't said that now?
I was really clear that I was talking about politicians.
I know, I just said that.
Yeah, and I do think that those politicians need to answer the question, which is why, when you were in power and had the opportunity to do something,
but do you wish you hadn't
nothing?
Conflated it with right-wing bandwagon, because that's not what people's concerns about grooming gangs weren't necessarily right-wing. Do you sort of wish you hadn't said it?
I don't. I've never implied that other people with genuine concerns, and certainly not victims, I've been working with victims. I've seen firsthand
it's not
the
a
impact
right-wing
it has
bandwagon, is it?
Victims. But I was calling out those politicians. I mean, I am frustrated in politics when people shout and scream a lot and do nothing when they got the opportunity to do it. It's one of the worst aspects of politics, in my view.
Unbelievable. It doesn't answer the question. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Very good morning to you. 6 minutes past 8. Nigel Farage, Leader of Reform, is here. Nigel, good morning.
Good morning. And by the way, Mark, I'm going to take issue with you from the off.
Yes.
That interview with Keir Starmer wasn't unbelievable. It was unbearable. I can't listen to him.
He's
all over the shop.
He is, isn't he? And I mean,
she asked him, what was his biggest mistake?
Yeah.
Do you know what his biggest mistake was? Going into politics.
Yes.
And why do I say that? Because actually, if you go into politics, you do it because you believe in something.
Yeah.
You think there's a course of action that needs to be taken that you think will make the country better. This bloke doesn't believe in a single thing other than the niceness of human rights law, international law, and the North London set. And what you're seeing with this premiership, you're seeing somebody who wanted to be Prime Minister for the sake of being Prime Minister, not with what he could do with it.
Well, some of the things that he communicates, like, for example, he said, he sometimes thought he didn't communicate things well. He puts out these videos of him walking around the G7 as if he's sending it to his mum. Look at me, I'm at the G7. Look, here I am with Donald Trump.
Picking up his papers.
Yeah, picking up his papers. Here I am walking past a big sign that says G7. Here I am on a stage with all these other world leaders. Look at me. It's a very narcissistic kind of approach he's got, and I think, I'm not a psychologist, but he comes across as a very narcissistic man. He can't take criticism, doesn't like answering questions.
I think the reason for that is the only thing that you could argue is going well is, or at least he thinks is going well, is Starmer on the world stage.
Yeah.
Going to the White House, the president's being nice to him, the president's repeatedly being nice about him and about Britain.
Yeah.
you know, meeting with Zelensky. These are the things that he thinks shows him in a very good light and a good image.
Yeah.
When it comes to domestic politics, I mean, he's U-turning on everything. What is remarkable, you know, I spent the whole of April on the road, as you know, out campaigning for those elections. The level of dislike of Starmer, I've never seen in the
I haven't. No, it's absolutely vitriolic.
And it's not just ideological either.
No.
They don't like him.
No.
Whether it's his voice, his approach. I mean, up in Durham, people said to me, well, we preferred that Corbyn.
Yeah.
We didn't agree with him,
right,
but at least we knew where he stood. And it's the fact this guy doesn't stand for anything. And you see these figures, you know, after the first 300 days. He is the most unpopular Prime Minister of modern times.
He is.
By some margin.
Incredible.
And I can't see any way back.
No, I can't. And this is why I keep saying, and people look at me as if I've got two heads when I say, because they, well, there's never been a Labour government that's got rid of its leader. This is so different, this situation, that I think he will not last. I just don't think he can, because even his own party have got no confidence in him. You can see, we did a montage earlier in the week, when he sent everybody out in January to say, we don't need a national inquiry into the rape gangs, because we've already had one, and also we've already had all these local inquiries, and what we need now is action. And everybody was out there. Wes Streeting was out there.
Yeah.
You know, Yvette Cooper, we played them all, and they all played the same, from the same hymn sheet. And now, of course, it's all been reversed. And they're all going, oh, well, of course, now we need a national inquiry. Well, what's changed?
Yeah. Well, what's changed is public opinion.
Yeah.
What's changed is Labour's poll ratings. What's changed is, I think there is a sense in the country now that enough really is enough.
Yeah. Totally.
I think there is a big shift out there going on. I think people are becoming increasingly intolerant of non-answers from politicians.
And lies as well. Actual barefaced lies.
Oh, I think this is one of the reasons that trust's broken down so much. It isn't that politicians break their promises, it's that we never actually mean to carry them out in the first place.
Right.
You know,
and this it's also the constant gaslighting, where he came out and when he said one of his greatest achievements, 2 million. He said, I wanted to get 2 million more appointments on the NHS. We've got 3 million. I talk to people every single day about the NHS.
I've seen no change.
And what they do is they get an appointment made and then it gets cancelled, and they get moved from one waiting list to another. That's the only reason there's more appointments being made. Nobody's being seen any quicker or any smarter.
No, but this is the spin, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the spin that he puts out. He does it at PMQs. He'll do it again today at midday. Maybe he'll even comment on Iran today. You never know.
You'd think he should.
And Kemi Badenoch today, as leader of the opposition, at least in the House of Commons, not in the country, you know, she should push him on this inquiry very hard today.
Yeah.
As you said in your intro at the top of the hour, who's going to be in charge of it? What are the terms of reference? Because I was looking at the notes last night. It keeps referring to local. So the inquiry will pick which parts of the country they examine. I find that worrying.
Right.
Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, says it'll take 3 years. So maybe they'll push it on to beyond the end of the next general election. So we'll see what comes of that. But you see, she's in a weak position as well, because she was the Minister for Women's Issues for 2 years before the general election, and she never raised this once in the House of Commons. So I kind of think this sort of toing and froing that's going on about this or the channel or whatever it is between the Conservatives and Labour, I'm not sure the country are listening to any of it.
No, they're not. They're definitely not. And I know that, you know, I can sometimes be accused of living in a bubble here at Talk, you know, because an awful lot of our listeners and viewers are Reform voters, but lots of them used to be Labour voters and lots of them used to be Tory voters. But, you know, what they say to me is that they've had enough of being treated as second-class citizens. It's not just about the fact that we used to be more tolerant. It's about the fact that not only are we now having to put up with larger and larger numbers of people coming into the country, they're actually jumping ahead of them in the queue. We had a guy yesterday phoned us in from Perth, works as a pilot instructor. He said he had 3 migrants come in the other day, wanted to learn how to fly. Now, aside from whatever you might want to think about 9/11 and all of that, you know, nobody knows who's paying for this stuff. You know, they're getting free driving lessons, they're getting trampoline lessons down in Kent.
So the Sun yesterday on page 2 published some of our first Doge findings in Kent, including TV licences. Asylum seekers having TV licences paid for, whereas if you don't, you know, get your licence and get found out, you could go to prison. Things like that. Oh, crazy golf.
What's annoying
crazy
people.
golf. How about that? Come into Kent on a dinghy, go and play crazy golf.
And of course, we had them, I think, last year being taken to Anfield for a sort of tour of Liverpool's football stadium. That kind of thing goes on all the time. And you and I have been doing this for a long time, and you much more than me. But I mean, I remember, I didn't realise it was 5 years ago, but it was. When you used to stand on the cliffs of Dover, pointing out to the sea, going out to sea quite frequently.
Going out to sea.
And seeing these people literally coming in.
I was filming this stuff. And I realised that people were not being deported. Therefore, it was worth them paying the traffickers. And even then, when I'd meet boats in the channel and talk to these people on the boats, they would just shout, England, England, England. Which way England? You know, and this is El Dorado. Because they know when they come here, they're going to get medical care, they're going to get dental care. I mean, try and get an NH dentist. They're going to be allowed to stay forever. And then what happens? Once they're given indefinite leave to remain, or once they're given, you know, the opportunity to stay because their asylum claim passes, they go to the top of the social housing list. And I saw this all over England in the recent county council elections, and the sense of unfairness that is out there, including, of course, amongst many that have come here legally in the last couple of decades, is very, very strong. And Starmer smashed the gangs, was never going to do anything. This issue was one of the top issues that wrecked the Conservative Party. Their repeated stop the boats, and it never happening. And I think what you're going to see over the course of this summer is, barring some major conflagration in the Middle East that we get involved in, this will go absolutely to the top. Because people are now starting to make the link. For example, the Casey report. She made it very clear that a substantial percentage of the men in the rape gangs were people who come into Britain illegally and claimed asylum. And as the public starts to join the dots, my last two Prime Minister's questions, I've said to Keir Starmer, will you declare a national security emergency in the Channel? And he absolutely refuses to do it. And I think they were in big, big trouble over this. Big
massive trouble. And that's why I suspect that they're going to try and fudge this whole Casey report.
So do I.
And the investigation.
So do I.
But I don't think the public are going to let them get away with it, because that's, again, the sense that I'm hearing. People are really angry about this. You know, this is almost the final straw.
Well, the thing is, it isn't just the Labour government that's in trouble. Our country's in trouble. And this isn't just people coming in and getting involved in rape gangs or grooming gangs, which actually culturally is not that surprising. Think about where they come from. Think about the status of women in many of these countries. I mean, they're not even second-class citizens. But it's also, I mean, I can't believe this. It's only a month ago that 3 Iranians who crossed the English Channel were arrested on terrorism charges. There are terrorists coming across the English Channel. People aren't talking about it, Mike. This is a national security emergency.
And we also know that previous people who have been involved in terrorism plots and all sorts of things have come via that method, you know, and it's ludicrous. And it seems, and remember, even just 2 or 3 years ago, people used to say to me, well, of course, immigration is not the biggest issue at all, you know, it's always the economy. It always has been, and as we know, you know better than anybody. And what about the way you were treated back then? Because, you know, Starmer talks about the far right. He still won't apologise for saying it. But when you first started talking about this, you were literally treated like Attila the Hun or something.
Rotherham 2014 was when I went to visit Rotherham, when this story was beginning to break, and I started talking about it. I remember being absolutely, I mean, savaged on Newsnight by Jeremy Paxman for daring to suggest there might be a link between certain nationalities and certain patterns of behaviour. And if you even then mention that it could be predominantly Pakistani men, well, I mean, you know, virtually go into hiding over it. So it just shows you how far things have changed. Yeah, I was ahead of the curve. Because of all of this, I've had to live a strange life in terms of security and where you go and what you do. But I'm pleased that I did stand up and say the right thing. And I think maybe one of the reasons why reform's doing well is people can see that actually people like myself and Richard Tice were prepared to say these things when there were unpopular things to say in the national media.
Absolutely right. Nigel, stay with us if you can. We're going to take a quick break. We'll take some questions from some people that have sent them in. But I want to talk to you as well just about the general growth of reform, how it's all going, you know, the way forward from here, I suppose. It's 17 minutes past 8. Nigel Farage is here. We'll be back after this.
Nobody helped, and every professional tried to cover it up. And I know there's some survivors in Oldham who got complete anonymity, and their abuse took place in Westminster.
Yeah.
And
So
this national inquiry needs to go and cover that.
I mean, it's got to cover all of it, hasn't it? I mean, there can't be a single stone unturned. Every single, from senior councillors to humble pen pushers.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 19 minutes past 8 in the morning. It is Wednesday, the 18th of June. We might be very soon involved in some kind of major conflagration in the Middle East, as Nigel Farage was telling us about Iran. Keir Starmer, I think, by the way, he's dodging Prime Minister's questions today. I think Angela Rayner's up because he presumably is still on his way back from Canada. But the G7 sort of ceased to be of any use to man or beast as soon as Donald Trump walked away from it the other day, didn't it?
And, you know, you've got the President of the European Council there. No one's ever heard of him. Right. You've got the President of the European Commission there. I mean, there's more EU people there.
Right. And then Zelensky shows up and he gets a big hug.
Yeah. And you have to say that suddenly America looks much stronger on its own than it looks with the G7. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know.
Yeah.
Trump and I, one of the first things that really Trump and I bonded over was Iran.
Yeah.
That Obama, Cameron, the European Union all thought, oh, these Iranians, they're really lovely people. We can do a deal with them.
Yes.
The JCPOA deal, as it was known at the time, freed up tens of billions of dollars in return for them promising not to continue to enrich uranium.
Yeah.
What did they do? Took the money to fund Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, and continue.
And to rearm themselves with a load of drones and missiles. They've now been firing at Israel.
And carried on with enrichment. And we've just had this completely wrong. I'm one of those people, Mike, I was opposed to the Libyan war. I thought it was crackers.
Yeah.
Whoever bad Gaddafi was.
And so it proved.
And so it proved. I was against the Iraq war too. I'm generally against war unless it's needed.
Right.
I don't think Israel had any choice but to take the action they took.
Yeah.
Here we are on day 6, and it looks like the mullahs are teetering.
Yeah. Well, apparently they only fired something like 25 missiles last night, so they're obviously running out.
They're running out.
Yeah.
The one thing that we do know with the 2 big nuclear facilities is that a lot of the kit's underground. It's going to take this MOAB, the mother of all bombs, that the Americans have, to take that out. Probably for the first time ever, I'm for regime change.
Yes.
I think the poor Persian people, and by the way,
so are they, by the way.
I've worked with Persians, I've met them all over the world. They deserve better than this awful, brutal regime.
Yes.
There's a risk of what comes next. Of course there is. But I actually think that Trump will intervene. I know there are voices within the Republican movement like Steve Bannon saying don't get involved.
Yeah.
I think Trump will do it.
Yeah.
Because he'll see it
well,
as
if you think about it, as you say, I mean, they are the kind of the spider at the centre of all the terror in the Middle East. And if you take them out, and by the way, I was talking to a former Israeli government spokesman just a little while ago. He said, you know, privately they're saying in Saudi and in the Emirates, they're with you. They want Israel to blow the hell out of it.
Do us all a favour.
Exactly right. A couple of other questions for you. One on France from Steve in Nottingham. He says, question for Nigel, what would he do about France when the small boats are turned back? No doubt the French would throw their dummy out the pram and close their borders or put heavy restrictions on. Richard Tyson and I have talked about this quite a lot, you know, turning the boats back physically. I mean, have you actually got a plan?
Well, there is
that?
UNCLOS law of the sea that would absolutely allow us to do that. Of course there'd be a huge diplomatic incident.
Yeah.
Of that there is no doubt. Of that there is no doubt at all. Just like when Tony Abbott, the Australian Prime Minister, towed the boats back to Indonesia. I mean, the hue and cry.
Yes.
Oh, the screams from our Foreign Office and the EU and the UN and everybody.
Yeah.
Look, the current course we're on is failing. And we can sit and criticise the French, you know, who've already had £800 million. And from Reeves's statement last week, I can see there's another couple of £100 million going their way. Even if the French do their stuff and start dragging them out of the water, those boats are launching from Dunkirk down to Berck. It's 100 miles of French beach. We will never stop the boats from leaving France. They need 10,000 soldiers on the beaches to stop every boat from going. The reason they're coming isn't the French's fault. The reason they're coming, it's our fault. It's about time we faced up to that.
Yeah, exactly right. One here from, where is it? Oh, Jane in Milton Keynes. Morning, Mike. Lovely show. Can you ask Nigel what you would do for us waspy women? I bet that's not a question you've been asked very often.
I've never made any false promises to waspy women. I'm sorry, it's done, it's over, it's not going to get changed.
Yeah, OK. Let's talk a bit about the EU, because Keir Starmer, as you say, has been sort of hobnobbing with the EU more than he has really with anybody. I mean, you talk about his enjoyment of being on the world stage. He loves nothing more than popping over to Brussels and giving away some more of our sovereignty. You know, we saw David Lammy sneaking off to Gibraltar the other day, and it now means that if you fly into Gibraltar as a British citizen, you have to see a Spanish border guard before they let you into our own sovereign territory, which seems insane. Do you worry that that is the beginning of a giveaway of Gibraltar?
The Gibraltarians are in a tight spot.
Yeah.
You know, I spoke privately to the Chief Minister last week. Down there. I've had family interests in Gibraltar going back many, many years. Yeah, I can't stand the fact that, you know, a British citizen could be refused by an EU guard. It's unlikely, but it's theoretically possible. I'm going to watch the Gibraltar thing very, very closely. What I do know is that Lammy's heart's not in this. He doesn't believe in the overseas territories, the dependencies at all. On the EU reset, well, look what's happened. Smoky bacon crisps. Have you seen what's going on?
We talked this the other day. I mean, is it anything to do with the fact that it's bacon? Is it anything to do with the fact that, I mean, the ludicrous idea that you can buy, you know, Lay's crisps in Spain. Whenever I go to Spain, you can buy Lay's crisps everywhere, which originate in America, which I would imagine are far more likely to be cancerous than anything that we produce. But, you know, they're saying it might be cancerous.
I will not have it. I will fight to defend smoky bacon flavoured crisps.
In the old days, somebody would be flying over France and dropping bags of crisps on them.
We can joke about it. And it's almost back to the old days of the curvy cucumber Brexit and all that. But what it shows is the extent to which Starmer has harmonised all of our food standards and regs, drink standards and regs, to EU law. Not, by the way, just the EU laws now, but the ones they make in the future. And, OK, it's easier to trade shellfish and food back and forth from Europe. Certainly, what it also means, Mike, is a lowering of our food standards, a lowering of our animal standards, something people in Britain take very, very seriously. It also makes it harder to import oranges from South Africa or anywhere else. And I just, everywhere you look, whether it's Chagos, whether it's the EU, whether it's the first steps in Gibraltar, you can't help but get the feeling that it's a government of university students still stuck with this left-wing ideology, basically dislike of Britain, of what it is and what it stands for. And that's where they're in big trouble, because there's a huge patriotic base of working people out there, you know, who've been allied to the Labour Party through their families pretty much since the end of World War I. and that's fracturing in a big way.
And it has, and I think the Grooming report has really proved that. Louise from Ipswich is asking this question, which a lot of people have asked. As Prime Minister, will you deport all foreign criminals, including those who have dual nationality, and their dependents?
I will be breaking a story next week that is off the charts. It's about foreign criminals in British prisons not being deported, even though they want to be.
They want to be.
Yeah. Well, let's say you're from Lithuania.
Yeah.
And you've been given a 15-year prison sentence. Yeah. At least if you go back to Lithuania to serve the time, your mum can come and see you. Yeah. We're not, even though people want to be deported, they're not being deported. The idea that we don't have as big a shortage of prison places as you think if we get rid of the foreign criminals, and we're just not doing it.
Well, there's 12,000 odd, isn't there? I mean, that would make a big gap. I mean, we saw one just the other day, I think it was in the Mail, a guy who was given 77 years in prison for being the sort of ringleader of a rape gang some time ago. He's now been freed for several years, but because he gave up his Pakistani citizenship, he now isn't any longer a dual citizen, so they won't deport him. Can you get around that then? Can you deport
I
those
think
people?
with most of this, yes. Most of this, yes. Everything that was done after the war in forming the European Convention on Human Rights and the court that backed it up, it was there as an early warning system to stop what happened to the Jews in Europe in the 30s happening again. We can understand exactly why. Yeah. But with three-quarters of a century on from that, we can't stay part of that anymore. And we're probably going to have to change a few British judges too, because they seem to lean on this stuff the whole time.
They do.
We need a radical change, not tinkering around the edges, but a radical change with the basis of law upon which we can decide who comes and who leaves our country.
So what's next for reform, finally? You did well in Scotland. Although,
we did.
People are going, oh, but they didn't win.
I know.
People are going, well, yeah, but they did come very, very close to actually, the people who did win.
Yeah, failure by reform in Scotland.
I know, absolutely. It's all over. Forget it. Just go home, pack your bags. But obviously, people are concerned. Are you able to form a big enough rump of a party to win enough seats? Because the polls say you'll win enough seats to be the next government. Can you find enough decent people, I suppose?
Look at what we've done in the space of a year. I mean, it's a meteoric rise.
Yeah.
We've been forming branches all over the country, getting thousands of candidates, and now's the moment to change the structure of the party, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. And when I leave here, I'll go straight to the office and keep working on it. So we've got a new chairman, formerly of this manor.
Yes, indeed.
Dr. David Bull.
Dr. David.
Who, I want someone to be a front-facing chairman, to tour the country, to go around the studios. David will be brilliant at that.
Yeah.
I'll be appointing a deputy chairman today who'll come in and look after the nuts and bolts of party rule books, putting into place the next stage of our democratisation, namely a board that runs the party. We've got a new director of communications, and operations in the party, and Zia Youssef, who's done absolutely manful work over the last 11 months with a burden on his shoulders that was utterly ridiculous. And he and I have frankly been inseparable over the last 11 months. He is now heading up Doge, and as I've said already, sitting with you this morning, already the Sun is running stories of what he's discovering.
Yeah.
And I think what we're going to see...
I think that's going to be a very rich vein, isn't it?
I think what we're going to see is that local government in Britain has had no scrutiny, despite the billions that go through it. Money has been wasted, contracts have been signed for long periods of time, and if it's that bad at county councils, what's it like in Whitehall?
Yeah. Fair enough. I've got to ask you the same question we've asked Keir Starmer, I suppose. What's been your biggest mistake, do you think, since you came back, if you have one?
I think I probably have spent too much time in the office, too much time doing administrative stuff, too much time trying to build the party. I probably could have spent more time actually out on the road, even though I spend more than any other. And that's why now, putting a team in place, I'm not saying once it's done I can forget about it, but I need to be out doing what I'm best at. So I probably overemphasised the office side of work rather than being outside.
Right. Nigel Farage, great to see you. Thank you very much.
Lovely to be here.
Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK. What next? What could come next? It's 8:32. We'll be back after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 8 o'clock. It's 8:33. Sorry, 8 o'clock. No, I'm here till 10, actually. No, what am I talking about? We did that one. Good morning, Mike. 2 tiers greatest achievement has to be lying with every single exhale of breath for every day of his premiership, says Lee. And it really is quite extraordinary how so many people are saying that about whatever is Keir Starmer's greatest achievement and what his absolutely most ridiculous one has been. Morning, Mike says, Starmer's greatest achievement is being in power for nearly a year without answering a single question. We thought he might be back for Prime Minister's questions today, but it turns out he's actually not. But we've got another great guest. This is an incredible show this morning. Sarah Vine, author and columnist at the Daily Mail, joins us. She's, of course, the author of a book, How Not to Be a Political Wife, which has really rattled the old cages of some of the people in Westminster. Sarah, very good morning to you.
Morning.
I'm sorry to have to say this like a fanboy, but I've been waiting years to try and get you on this show, so I'm very glad that you've finally been able to make it.
I don't think you've ever asked.
Well, my people keep telling me that they keep asking you, but maybe they're just lying.
Got the wrong number for me.
Lying to me, obviously. It was a fantastic book. You've obviously had quite. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it's over, but you've had a fantastic life. You know, you're in the paper today writing about the abortion voting last night. What makes it all happen for you? What makes it tick?
Well, actually, the thing is, I don't really have a life, so then I can do all the writing.
Well, you're not allowed to have a life if you work for the Daily Mail, are you?
No, you just have to sit at your desk. You're just literally chained to the typewriter.
Yes. But I mean, you wrote about things that people don't normally write about in the world of politics. You know, there's this kind of omerta in Westminster, isn't there, where everybody knows things about people, but you don't really talk about it in public. Certainly don't tell the plebs about it. But you did all of that.
I know. Well, that's the thing. That's what I just thought, tell the truth and shame the devil. I think it's time that people knew what goes on and what it's actually like.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not that bad. It's just, I just felt it was, I've always felt like a bit of an outsider. I think if you're a hack like we are, you're always a bit on the outside, aren't you? It's an outsider's job, really, especially if you do it well.
Right. And that's the thing. Unless you cross over, as your former husband Michael Gove did, because he went from being a hack. I mean, he's now gone back to sort of being a hack, I suppose you might say. But he went from being a hack into being quite a powerful person within the government.
Yes, and then all sorts of pressures and levers come to bear on you, and suddenly you're not really your own person anymore. You have to sort of play a game, and the game is the main thing. I mean, it is just a sort of huge giant game, really. Both Michael and David Cameron were obsessed with Game of Thrones at the time, years ago when it first came out, because it is that, and half of what politicians spend their time doing is playing this game to hold on to the power, and it's very addictive. I mean, power is a real, it's a drug. And anyway, I thought it was time for me to write my memoir. Lots of people have written their accounts of that time, and they're all brilliant and great and worth reading. And I just suddenly thought, I sort of got to a stage in my life where I realised that that I wasn't really going to be friends with the Camerons ever again.
Right.
That sort of ship had sailed, and for a while I hoped maybe we would sort of reconcile, but it's just never happened. And I don't know, I'm 58. I thought I'd like to draw a line under it all, just write it all down, get it all in a and then it's there, it's done. I can sort of move on and do other things.
Yeah. And you said that you had this falling out with Sam Cameron. I mean, I'm assuming she's not a very easy person to get to know, is she?
Oh, she's very easy to get to know. She's a very nice, normal person. She's a great girl. I mean, really fun, and that, that's why we were such good friends. I mean, she is a great gal, but the life basically got in the way. Politics got in the way, I should say. I mean, that's really what happened.
And that's really the end of it, isn't it? If you have sort of political differences when you're at that level, you can't really hang out together.
Yeah, it's difficult because obviously, she was very loyal to Dave, I was loyal to Michael. So, you have to kind of, you have to make your choices, don't you?
Right.
and it's a shame that you have to make those choices, but that's what politics is like. You know, it's just, it is brutal, and it's relentless, and it is toxic. You know, it's a really toxic thing to have in your life. It's like it's like living with an addict. It really is. It's just a nightmare.
Yeah. And so, I mean, Brexit obviously was quite a divisive issue, presumably for everybody in the Tory party at that time.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it was a sort of, it was explosive. I mean, the referendum, I think, was a colossal act of self-harm. I don't think. I mean, Dave was told not to do it by lots of people, including Michael, actually. Yeah. But he pressed ahead for whatever reason. I think probably because he was. I don't know. I think he sort of wanted to cauterize the wound, as it were. He hoped to draw a line under it, and in a way, it just made it worse. Yeah. And you know, it turned it into a sort of massive psychodrama that really actually still hasn't gone away.
No,
you know?
It's still there, isn't it?
It destroyed the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
Basically, it destroyed the Conservative Party, and you know, we're almost 10 years on, and it still hasn't been able to recover.
Right. And I mean, the Conservative Party is in a very bad place right now. I mean, it might be it's even destroyed forever at this point. I
mean, I would hope not, because I do think that the Conservative Party is basically, you know, the sort of set party, the most sensible option for the country, generally speaking. Also, they do have, I mean, most Tory MPs are very good. But I think that the public have, I mean, quite understandably, look at what they've done over the last few years and just think these people are mad. You know, we can't, you know, just the sort of psychosis of it, you know, not just Brexit, you know, not just the aftermath, not just sort of the nightmare of Theresa May, which was, you know, not success. Then, you know, all of the kind of Liz Trusses and all the drama with Boris. I mean, it's just like, it's a sort of like an extended soap opera.
Yeah. Well, I remember 2019, which was one of the most bizarre years, I think, of my working career, where I sat for a large part of the time in a tent on College Green, which we used to call the tent of shame. And we didn't really have any right to be there, but we used to just nick all of the good guests that were walking down to go to Sky and ITV and BBC. And we had this very beautiful Spanish producer who would just sort of woo everybody and bring them down to sit next to me. And it was so bizarre because every day we just sort of did the same story. And people came on and sat down and said the same things, and it went on and on and on. I remember we even had to sit on a Saturday. You remember when Oliver Letwin's bill went through, or his amendment or something, and we sat there all day and nothing happened, and it was kind of like, this is excruciating. And then finally Boris Johnson sort of fixed it all by having an election and getting Brexit done, but then it didn't get done.
No, I know, and the thing is, I mean, I do think that Dave was wrong to walk away on the morning of the Brexit vote. I think if he had stayed...
Yeah. And he certainly shouldn't have hummed on the way back to the door.
No, if he'd just come out and said, "Look, I'm really surprised that this is not the result I wanted, but I am the Prime Minister. I am going to stay. I will try and ensure, you know, a sort of orderly transition."
Yeah.
I think it would have taken the heat out of the situation. But instead of which he left, and that just precipitated this sort of seismic kind of crisis.
Yeah.
All of these characters just sort of exploded, and it's just carried on since then. I mean, I think, you know, looking at the Conservative Party now, I mean, I really like Kemi Badenoch because I think she's a slow and steady person, and I think if they are going to survive, if they are going to regroup, and I think that's what they need. They need someone who is very slow and steady, and not too buffeted by, you know, the sort of news cycle, not too obsessed with all of that. She's, you know, she has that very sort of solid energy, I think. But whether she can pull it off, I don't know. We have to wait and see. Yeah. I mean, there are lots of other pressures.
I mean, she's got plenty of opportunity to take the mickey out of Keir Starmer, who's doing probably as bad a job as I could imagine anybody ever doing.
Absolutely. And, you know, I know you just had Nigel on your show, and I think he is very impressive. But, for example, you know, he wasn't in the chamber the other day for the vote, for the debate about the grooming gangs.
Yeah.
You know, there's an element of, you know, we need a bit more seriousness in politics, actually. You know, he should have been there. He should have spoken on that.
Well, I suppose he would say in his defence that, you know, he had to be somewhere else. There were people from Reform there. There's only 5 of them, you know, and there is representation. But, I mean, I'm not speaking for him. Let's talk about Boris Johnson. You say that he's not a good person to sit next to at dinner in the book. Was he a good person to have been Prime Minister, do you think?
I actually think he did an amazing job during COVID in an impossible situation. Yeah. I don't know that I can't imagine anyone else would have done. It was an impossible situation, and everything was on Zoom during COVID. Yeah. So all of the cabinet meetings took place on Zoom. So, I was sort of around the house listening, not eavesdropping, but sort of catching bits of conversation. And from what I remember, he was incredibly serious, conscientious, very worried, very on it, always asking important, interesting questions. He really did work incredibly hard, and made himself quite ill. And I all credit to him. I think he did a really, really good job, and it was a real shame when the whole sort of Partygate thing did for him, because it was just nonsense.
It was. Yeah, totally. Absolutely right.
And all the nonsense about gold wallpaper. And that was all just, I know, because I've been on the other end of this stuff, that 99% of what you read in the papers about politicians is just made up. It's just nonsense.
Well, of course, it's not necessarily just made up, though, is it? It's fed to them by people who have got an axe to grind.
Yeah, it's all tribal. There'll be someone who's upset about something because, I don't know, someone ignored them at a party or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Feed some gossip to some hack who will just make it, and it just, the Partygate stuff was particularly bad because it was actually quite wicked to do that to this person who I think had just who had worked so hard and tirelessly, and all of the people in Number 10 during that time, they were working 24 hours a day to try, and all that happened was there was just all this sniping and bitching, and it felt really like it was a thankless task.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people it is a thankless task, and I think, there is a great, I think, disconnect now between the general public and politicians, and certainly the two major parties, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, and I think partially that's because politicians have brought it on themselves, because they have given this image of being a bit out of touch with what's actually happening in the real world.
Yes, I think generally my feeling is that if politicians are more authentic about what it is that they have to go through and how their lives are and how difficult the job is, I think people would. Oh, sorry, that was my doorbell. I think people would. That's now my dog barking, which is,
of course, naturally. Well, this is the great wonders of Zoom, isn't it?
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Muffin, shut up. No.
Don't worry. Carry on.
But no, I think those conversations. Sorry, I'm just going to get Muffin and shut. I know.
Yeah, all right.
I think people, politicians try to present this image of sort of perfection, and, that they can handle anything, and they're not. They're just humans, and this is partly what this book is about.
Yeah.
Is to try and show the sort of human side of politics a little bit, to get people, to give people a sense of the dynamics and how that all works. Because I think lots of people have written very technical books about politics, and I just wanted to write something that was more about the people, the personality, right, the interactions. And, it is just like any other world, any other business. It's all humans, really, be messy and get it. Like, I'm very messy. I've got lots of things wrong. And really, the person who's the worst behaved in this book is probably me, because I'm so useless in so many ways. But I think, the messiness of humans is always interesting. And the way that it impacts in politics is fascinating, because politics is so important to everyone's lives. You have to understand that.
Absolutely right. Somebody just pointed out to me that Nigel was speaking at Patrick O'Flynn's funeral the other day. That's why he missed the Grooming Gangs debate, which I suppose is a fairly good reason. One final thing, just on your commentary today in the Mail, page 5, about this abortion ruling or bill that was passed through last night, which basically decriminalises abortion. You were saying that you think that the manoeuvrings that have been going on behind the scenes are more likely to create a sort of pro-life movement now here in this country, which there isn't really, is there?
No, there isn't. I'm not anti-abortion at all. I just think it's one of those very complex issues, and there has to be a degree of, common sense around it. I think the current provision is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
24 weeks, but this idea that you've now decriminalised it up to term, it's really, for me, I think it will make a lot of people turn anti.
It feels a bit unnecessary to me, and I mean, I don't talk about it much on the show because, you know, apart from the fact, one, I'm not a woman, you know, two, it always leads to sort of very polarised debates, and an awful lot of men who sometimes say, you know, why should women be allowed to do this? And it doesn't really get you. I don't think it's something that the government should be involved in, or the legislature really either.
Well, I think that, I mean, the thing is, they framed it as a sort of great feminist, you know, great step forward for feminism. It's not at all. I mean, you know, the interesting statistic is that in the last 160 years, there were 3 prosecutions for illegal abortions, right? 3. Since they introduced pills by post, you know, the abortion pill,
the morning after pill,
which was it's not the morning after pill, it's the abortion pills, which are legal up to 10 weeks.
Okay.
And you can get them without a face-to-face consultation, and that was brought in during COVID. Since they introduced that, there have been 6 prosecutions for women who have tried to terminate beyond the legal limit. And I think there's a sort of the decriminalising of the process. I mean, I think you need to have parameters for something like abortion. I mean, I just the idea that you would terminate a fetus that was, you know, almost at term or at term just makes no sense. Why not just have the baby and give it up for adoption? Why not make adoption in this country is a nightmare. It's a really complicated and difficult process, and there's a lot of red tape. Why not just make adoption easier? Just support these women. If they don't want to keep the child, that's fine. But I just think this idea that you're going to effectively kill a fully grown baby just because it's still in the womb is just ridiculous. I mean, if it was outside of the womb, that would be murder. Look at Lucy, you know, her youngest victim was 30 weeks.
Yeah, I know.
So
shocking.
She's in jail for murder, rightly so. But, you know, why is it murder just because it's out of the womb and not murder if it's in the womb? I don't get it. It's just horrible. And I also don't think there was enough debate about it.
No, it came and went very quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, but I'm also really surprised that so many MPs voted for it. I mean, it was a huge, stonking majority.
Yeah, but a lot of the Labour MPs, of course, voted because it's all about a woman's rights and not about the rights of the child.
Yeah, but women's rights are important, but they don't preclude the rights of a fully grown, you know, of a 40-week-old fetus.
No, exactly right.
I don't think most people think that, and I think that just shows it is really out of touch, don't you think? It's just really.
I think so. I mean, all the reaction has been similar to yours, to be honest, that I've seen. But listen, a great pleasure to talk to you, Sarah. Thank you very much indeed. We must have you on more often. And give my regards to Muffin. Maybe we'll make an appearance next time. Sarah Vine, author and columnist at the Daily Mail. The book's called How Not to Be a Political Wife. And it's actually a great read. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 9. I'm Mike Graham.
I gave a presentation last Monday and said I thought that Iran's regime wouldn't last 6 months. That was before the Israeli attacks. I think it's just accelerated now, given the conditions inside Iran. 70% of people on less than $5 a day. They hate their government. The only thing that's holding them in place right now is the heavily repressive apparatus of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the security services.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:53. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here. Page 10 of The Sun today, we've got Sir James Dyson writing about why there is a lack of vision in the UK right now and why it's time to fight back against the war on aspiration, as he puts it. Let's talk now to Jack Elson, political editor at The Sun. Jack, very good morning to you. Breaking news this morning that inflation's fallen by practically nothing and it's still pretty much running at 3.4%. No great news there for the growth division of the Department of the Exchequer. But James Dyson writing a great piece, I think, today, because I agree with him that Britain, certainly the Britain that I grew up in, was very much a sort of get out and get something done, particularly during the 80s, which I know you won't remember, but I certainly do, when Margaret Thatcher was in charge and there was this kind of thrusting economy and people were going into the city and working and people were getting jobs that they never thought they could get before. And the kind of aspiration of all of that seems to have disappeared. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, you're totally right. And I think that James Dyson really does actually embody, this sort of aspiration nation, which, like you said, we used to actually try and facilitate in this country, letting people have a chance, letting people fail, but also, letting people take a punt, because that serves not just themselves, but obviously, the rest of society as well, who hasn't got a Dyson vacuum cleaner or expensive air wrap as some girlfriends often demand. But what I would say in this piece, I think James Dyson makes a very good point, is that the policies, especially of this government, seem to be strangling any type of aspiration and growth, whether it is a raid on national insurance to the tune of £25 billion at the last budget, whether it is wrapping up businesses in employer red tape through Angela Rayner's employment rights bill. All of these things together are not going to bring in money for the Exchequer in the long term, James Dyson says, because one, people just won't invest in this country, and two, the wealth creators and the job creators will just up sticks and go somewhere else. And that's what we're seeing. Millionaires, people that pay a lot of money in this country are just going to think, you know what, it's not worth staying in Britain anymore when I can actually keep a lot more of my money and go somewhere else. And so I think there is a fine line. Obviously, we want people to pay tax in this country because it contributes towards the Exchequer and public services and the rest of it. But as James Dyson points out in this piece, the brilliant Laffer curve model, means that if you squeeze the pips too hard, then actually you get nothing in return because people just go. And so it's the fine line which I think he's talking about in this piece.
And that does seem to be the line that Rachel Reeves has crossed, because we've seen already numbers of people leaving the country. There's talk as well, I don't know if you've heard this in the Westminster whisperings, that they might actually go rowing back a bit on the non-dom tax because it had a really, really negative effect. Instead of collecting more money, they've actually collected less money.
Yeah, I think so. I think Rachel Reeves and some of the Treasury ministers have been having conversations with city types who are incredibly angry about this, not necessarily to line their own pockets, but obviously people will just leave. And, non-doms do contribute, a lot to this country. And if they're not here, then the overall tax rate will go down. And also it's job creation as well. I think that this sort of trickle down is actually real. And if people actually do make money in this country, then often it is people at the bottom who do benefit as well through people going out spending money and the rest of it. And so, yeah, you're right. She is clearly looking at watering down her non-dom policy. It seemed that when she came in, there was a big ideological push. Whether it's taxing businesses or sort of watering down inheritance taxes and the rest of it. I think now she's sort of woken up, smelled the coffee a bit, and actually some of these Labour policies aren't too good for the economy, and they have seized on the 0.7% growth that they got in the first quarter of this term. But then obviously last month's growth figures were in negative territory, and clearly that was one before Donald Trump's tariffs came in. But I think more importantly, that national insurance rate I don't think can be underestimated in, I think, the sapping of confidence it has done to businesses who make jobs in this country, because £25 billion across the business is an incredibly big burden to bear. And that's before you get to the national minimum wage rise and all of Angela Rayner's new red tape, which is going to really sort of saddle businesses. And so, they're talking about growth in this country, and we constantly hear Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer saying it's their number one mission, or James Dyson saying put your money where your mouth is and actually give pro-growth policies.
Yeah, and that's right, because I'm afraid the evidence is that the growth is just simply not there. I mean, the CBI this morning have said basically that their forecast for UK growth this year is going to be downgraded from 1.6% to 1.2%, and then next year it's going to go all the way down to just 1%. So 2026 ain't looking any better.
No, it's chicken feed, isn't it? And we get politicians now that cheer getting 1% growth. I mean, that is nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And I tell you what, it's not going to pay for the policies and the spending splurge which Rachel Reeves has enacted. You know, much of her borrowing plans rely on the country getting growth. Lots of it is front-loaded. If we don't get that growth, then we're going to go even deeper into debt. You know, we're currently paying about £100 billion a year just to pay off the interest on our debt. That is about double the defence budget. Yeah. It is completely unsustainable. And unless you get that growth in this country, and a lot of other supply side reforms, such as building more houses and cutting the benefits bill, then the economy is just going to be on its knees as it is at the moment. And so growth, I think, and getting more of these entrepreneurs and aspiration nation, getting back to that good fertile ground for entrepreneurs, I think is what James Dyson is making in this piece. It's a fantastic piece, and I'd encourage people to go and read the whole thing.
Absolutely right. It's a great piece. Jack, thanks very much indeed. Jack Elsom there from the Sun, political editor, talking about the page 10 piece by Sir James Dyson. All about aspiration. Bring it back, he says. Absolutely, I agree. Starmer's greatest achievement was his countdown to switching the Christmas lights on at Downing Street, says Terry. Yeah, indeed. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. See you after this. Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humsley Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar. Hello, and lady. Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. We're into the final hour of the show already. I can't believe how quickly time has gone. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 9. We're here, of course, until Julie Hartley-Brewer takes over just before 10 o'clock. Coming up in this hour, we've got Dan Hodges, commentator for the Mail on Sunday, who wrote a pretty excoriating piece yesterday in the paper about Keir Starmer and about this grooming gangs problem, which has existed for the Labour Party for decades and decades and decades. Keir Starmer himself certainly knew about it for over a decade. And, of course, everybody's now running for cover. What we don't know, as I said to Nigel Farage in the last hour, is exactly who is going to be appointed to run the investigation, who is going to be chairing this national inquiry. Is it actually really a national inquiry, or is it just a bit of a fudge where people are going to find that, oh, there's a bit of a regional inquiry here, a bit of a sort of poke about over there, a bit of a regional inquiry over there as well, but we're kind of not really going to do much more than put a commission together, which will report back in about 3 to 4 years, by which time, you know, everybody will have forgotten about it. Well, nobody's going to forget about this one, because the people of this country are fed up. They're sick to the back teeth. They've basically had enough of what they've seen before their very eyes. And we've talked to many, many survivors of this horrible mass multiple rape gang culture that seems to exist in Pakistani communities up and down the country. And we're going to be speaking to another survivor in this hour as well. Also, the news this morning that up to a third, possibly more, of sex attacks last year were committed, according to the Ministry of Justice, by foreign men. So it's now very clear that there is a massive link, as Nigel Farage just said, between people coming here illegally on the small boats and sex attacks happening in this country. And if you don't understand why that is going to be incredibly important as a connection for Keir Starmer, then I don't know what I can explain to you. Also, of course, we're waiting for Keir Starmer to speak on the grooming gangs issue. Massively missing in action at the moment, because all he's doing really is announcing a national inquiry, going off to Canada, taking part in a G7 meeting, and not really saying much else about it. All he said to Beth Rigby last night was that he didn't regret calling people jumping on a far-right bandwagon, because he aimed at purely and simply at the politicians, not at ordinary people. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We've also been talking about his biggest achievement and his biggest mistake, and let's hear what he thinks his biggest mistake is.
In terms of mistakes, look, I think that we haven't always told our story as well as we should, explained our decisions in the way that might, in retrospect, have been better, but that's the nature of politics. I suppose the story at the end of the first year is this. We had to clear up the mess, and the first year was really about that. But as we now turn into the second year with the spending review, now's the time we can show that having cleared up that mess, taken those tough but necessary decisions, now you can see in the spending review, with the investment we're making in our public services, in our infrastructure, in our jobs, apprentices, you name it, you can see the difference that the Labour government makes.
Yeah, we can see the difference. And as Mick Barnsley says, Starmer's biggest achievement is that he's managed to screw the country up in just 1 year. Very well done, Sir Keir. Yeah, we'll clap him round for that. Talking about HS2, by the way, just before we talk to Dan Hodges, breaking news, inflation has fallen by 0.1%, literally not at all, to 3.4%. Talking about HS2, which has been told, which we're going to be told by by Heidi Alexander, sorry, coming up a little bit. She's the convicted fraudster. I keep forgetting she's not Minister for Transport anymore. HS2 is going to take another 2 or 3 year delay, so it's not going to be ready until sometime near the end of the next decade, 2037, 38, something like that. Keith says this, HS2, where do we start? In my area of the rural Midlands, we've had this blight foisted upon us, destroying farmland, wildlife, and turning what was a beautiful rural landscape into an ugly, satanic industrial wasteland. More dead wildlife on the roads, courtesy of HS2, plus the endless developments. I remember the HS2 heavy stopping us using local footpaths at the start of this nightmare. We are expecting all of their compounds to eventually be designated as brownfield and then developed. More countryside gone. They have traffic controls on all our roads here. I sit seething in the queues at their red lights whilst this destructive white elephant burns cash that could be used for good things. Well, yeah, I mean, 37 billion wasted by the Tories. That's according to Heidi Alexander. We'll get on to that a little bit later on. Let's talk to Dan Hodges, though, first up, because he's commentator of Mail on Sunday. He wrote a great piece yesterday in the paper in which the headline said this: Starmer has known about the appalling abuse for a decade, yet he opposed a national rape inquiry because he knew it would damage Labour. Dan, a very good morning to you.
Morning.
It's been another weird old week, hasn't it, for Keir Starmer? So it's still going to damage Labour, so why has he done it now?
Well, I think the reason he's done it is because, as I say in the piece, I mean, the dam has finally burst. I mean, I think specifically, Louise Casey was appointed to conduct this, I've got to be honest, slightly strange review. I'm not entirely sure what the review was supposed to achieve, but when she was appointed, she was on record as saying she didn't believe there was a need for a national inquiry. So it seems pretty clear the purpose of appointing her was for her to produce a report that said we don't need a national inquiry.
Right. That's what I think.
Yeah, for reasons that aren't clear and may never become clear. Obviously, Louise Casey changed her mind. Now, it could be that she looked in detail at huge swathes of new evidence and changed her own mind. If she did, it's not in her report. There is nothing in the report that we didn't know a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Right. I suspect that what actually happened is, I think it became, people within Downing Street realised if we had another report which said there's nothing to see here, move along, we don't need a national inquiry, that would have been politically unsustainable.
Yeah.
So I think if Casey did decide, and as I said, we don't understand why she changed her view, but if she did change her view, I think people in Downing Street decided to just basically roll with that.
Right.
But the key thing is this: we have all seen. I've been on this program. We've been talking about this ever since I think, was it the turn of the year? When was it?
I think so, yeah, because it was back in January, wasn't it? It was when Elon Musk started sort of agitating on Twitter.
But this is the point. Everybody. This is the thing that frustrated me yesterday and earlier in the week. Everybody was saying this all happened because Elon Musk intervened. But Elon Musk intervened only after it emerged that Jess Phillips had rejected Oldham Council's request for national government support with the inquiry.
Yeah.
And this is the key thing. It is not just that Keir Starmer and Jess Phillips are now running around pretending they supported a national inquiry all along. They wanted justice for the victims all along.
Right.
Did the government not want a national inquiry? They didn't want any. They didn't want to be involved in local inquiries. They didn't want inquiries at all.
Right.
And
because of what you said, that they know it would damage them, because we know that most of the inquiries that were going to focus on where it was worst was where Labour councils have been in charge for eternity.
Exactly. I mean, this is why, since they were elected, Labour has fought and Keir Starmer have fought tooth and nail to prevent a national inquiry. And it's for these three very clear, very political reasons. The first is, in the majority of cases, the abuse and the cover-up occurred in Labour councils. The second reason is the abuse, and Casey has finally, if somewhat grudgingly, admitted that the evidence that does exist is very, very clear on this.
Yeah.
The abuse is being conducted disproportionately, and that is an understatement, by Pakistani heritage men. And obviously that has implications for Labour's base and Labour's support within its Muslim community, a base of support that the Labour ministers are already panicking is fracturing. Obviously, the third thing comes back to this right-wing bandwagon phrase, which Starmer is still bandying about.
Yeah, well, he had a chance to deny it to Beth Rigby, and he didn't.
Exactly. You know, and the political calculation that this is an issue that, frankly, boosts reform, boosts Nigel Farage, feeds into their agenda, and that by having a series of, by having a national inquiry, it would simply boost reform. Now, you know, Keir Starmer, as I said, he was doing it again yesterday. He was tying himself up in knots yesterday. He was saying, oh, no. You know, when I was referring to people jumping on the right-wing bandwagon.
Far-right bandwagon it was.
Right-wing the far-right bandwagon. I was just referring to politicians.
Yeah. What rubbish.
Well, on the basis of his own argument, he himself is now a politician who was elected upon a right bandwagon. So I just set the morality of this aside for a moment. I just don't understand the politics here.
No.
You know, we had a situation last week where Keir Starmer did an interview and he fessed up. You may agree or disagree with this interpretation, but he fessed up and said, actually, you know, in retrospect, I should have chosen my words more carefully. I shouldn't use the phrase island of strangers in the speech. Why does he not simply do the same thing about this right-wing bandwagon when we all know it wasn't merely a right-wing extreme right bandwagon? It was something that the victims and survivors were calling for. It's something that politicians across the political spectrum were calling for, and it was something that was legitimate. And why he cannot simply acknowledge he was wrong about that, God only knows.
Well, I think it's because there's two different cohorts of people that he's dealing with. You know, the ones who he upset with the Island of Strangers were in his own party, so he thought he'd better correct that. But the ones who he's accused of being, you know, far-right bandwagon jumpers are not. So I guess he doesn't feel like he needs to apologise because he's very anti, I think, right-wing. I mean, you get the impression. I had Deanna Davidson in here the other morning, and she told a story that she's actually told me once before about Keir Starmer, the man. And she said, you know, she actually used to get on quite well with Jeremy Corbyn, who was always polite. He was always quite friendly in the House of Commons whenever they'd see each other in corridors or in, you know, the tea room or whatever. She said she several times held the door open for Keir Starmer, and every time she did it, he never acknowledged her, he never looked her in the eye, he walked through, didn't say thank you, and most of his acolytes did the same. She said one or two of them occasionally did, but he never did. And I said, do you think it was about the fact that you were a Tory? And she said, yeah, I do. I don't think it was because, you know, he just thought he was better than everybody else. He really doesn't like people that he thinks are politically from the other side of the fence.
Well, look, I mean, you know, if that's how Keir Starmer sees the world, frankly, you know, kind of that's politics. And there are politicians of all...
Yeah, but it doesn't make him a leader, though, does it?
No, but I mean, there are politicians across the political spectrum who are, you know, tribal, and some would say excessively tribal. I haven't got a problem with that. What I do think, what I have got a real problem on is this argument about the politicisation of the issue.
Yeah.
You know, as I said, we saw Keir Starmer, for political purposes, attempting to brand those people calling for a national inquiry, frame them as being on the far right or jumping on a far right bandwagon. They were his words.
Yeah.
When Katie Lamb in the House of Commons a couple of months ago specifically raised the ethnicity of the perpetrators for these crimes, Jess Phillips attacked her and accused her of attempting to construct a false hierarchy of victims.
Yeah.
Now, the Casey report makes clear that the ethnicity of the perpetrators is fundamental.
Of course it is.
Dealing with this issue.
And that's exactly what's been denied for decades, isn't it?
Justice they deserve. And Jess Phillips, again, purely for political reasons, attacked Katie Lamb.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is, up until Monday, the Labour Party were conducting a political defence of their position on the grooming gangs issue.
Yeah.
The Labour Party were introducing politics into the debate by accusing anybody or trying to gaslight or frame anybody who was calling for an inquiry as being far right. And then at the start of then suddenly, when Kemi Badenoch, and you know I'm not Kemi Badenoch's biggest fan, but fairly and legitimately got up in the House of Commons and said, come on, you know, you've been resisting this, you've been attacking all of us.
Yeah.
They suddenly have the temerity to turn around and accuse Kemi Badenoch of playing politics with
I know. It's unbelievable. It really is. Let's have a quick look, actually, because I haven't seen this yet. Baroness Casey quizzed by MPs yesterday about exactly what you've just been talking about.
We dug deeper into 3 police force areas where there's a clear high rates of child sexual exploitation offending, and dug deeper into those to see whether they had established the facts and figures, and they had established the facts and figures much more than the national data. It's clear that if you look at those 3 large police forces and their data, one is historic, to be fair, the other 2 are live, then the disproportionality issue is clear, and obviously they ask for, when they ask for ethnicity, they largely, one stops at Asian, the other stops at Pakistani heritage.
And there it is. You can't get away from it. But I mean, the question now that's being asked, and I'm being asked it more repeatedly than ever, is who's going to run this inquiry? Is it actually going to be a proper inquiry, or is it going to be a sort of watered-down commission which has just got a few kind of tentacles in a few local inquiries that are already going on? Because unfortunately, the MO of this government is that they announce something's going to happen, and then it doesn't really happen in quite the way that they suggested.
Absolutely, I just want to come on to that, but just to pick up on what that clip we just saw from Baroness. Right, Baroness Casey is sitting there, and remember, Baroness Casey herself said she didn't think there was a need for a national inquiry and changed her mind.
Yeah.
Baroness Casey was then citing this evidence that she claimed to have found from these 3 police forces, which show that the perpetrators were disproportionately men of Pakistani origin. Was Baroness Casey seriously not aware of that until she conducted this report?
Yeah.
Was Keir Starmer not aware of it? Were Labour ministers not aware of it? Because if you went and spoke to anybody in the north of England, any part of England, and there were dozens and dozens and dozens where these crimes were being perpetrated, everyone in those areas would have told you that. We have known for decades that this was the core of the issue. And it's not just that these were appalling crimes of abuse, they were appalling racial crimes. The victims were abused by Pakistani heritage men because they were white. We have evidence after evidence after evidence from the court cases of the victims testifying that the perpetrators literally said to them they were being abused because they were white girls. That's why the crimes were not investigated, for fear of racism. We've had report after report into this fact. And you've got people like Louise Casey and Keir Starmer suddenly saying, oh, well, we, didn't know until this week, maybe we need a national inquiry after all. Now, but here's the other thing. I completely share your concerns about this, and I said this in the piece. Seems to me what has happened, and remember, a few weeks ago, the Labour government tried to get away with watering down the local inquiries and watering down the funding for the local inquiries. They seem to have been reinstated. But then we have this opaque, as you said, sort of national commission, which seems to in some way be sitting over a series of local inquiries. What it's doing isn't clear. What powers it has isn't clear. Whether it is actually conducting any investigations isn't clear. And crucially, is it in a position to call and demand testimony from witnesses? What role does it have? And here's the other thing that I do not understand. We do not need this bizarre sort of complex, opaque investigation, because we have a very clear model, right? You remember, I think what we're up to now, 15, 20 years ago, we had the murder of Stephen Lawrence. The parallels are almost identical. An appalling racist a murder with racist implications, with national implications, and that uncovered institutional racism and an establishment cover-up. We had correctly a very clear, very focused, very effective, very successful, very transparent, judge-led public inquiry. Now, the rape gang scandal is one of, if not the biggest national scandals in our national history.
Yeah, I think so.
We all know the things that the politicians clamour for public inquiries into, and some of them are obviously very, very important. You know, we've had a national public judge-led inquiry into whether or not celebrities were having their phones hacked. Okay, that is an important issue. I'm not trying to in any way minimise that, but I'm not sure it's quite as important as the industrial rape of children around the country. We've just had an inquiry, a very clear, focused inquiry into Grenfell.
Yeah.
Again, I think that is absolutely right. But the number of victims of the rape gang scandal far outstrips the number of.
And it's been going on for such a long time that there is no excuse for it not to be absolutely and utterly investigated forensically, and for people to be singled out, found guilty, charged, and, you know, found to have been involved in the cover-up. That's the most important thing. But Dan, listen, we've got to run because we've been going on a bit long. Thank you very much indeed for your time. One other thing I should mention with Dan, he's just tweeted out, there's one poll that's come out just now, and it's one of those polls from an organisation called More in Common. They've got Reform ahead, of course, at 29%, leading +1, but the second place goes to the Conservative Party. Labour have now slipped down into third place on 21%. Lib Dems fourth, Greens fifth, SNP down at the bottom. Reform obviously still powering away with a 7-point lead over the Conservatives, but Labour dropping to third place. For heaven's sake, goes from bad to worse for them. Coming up a little bit later on in this hour, we'll be speaking to Fiona Goddard, who is, of course, one of the victims of the rape gang abuse. She's fighting for justice for her and for everybody else, and she's saying she wants to urge others to come forward in a bid to smash the sick culture of abuse which is going on, still going on in this country. We'll be talking to her coming up shortly. This is Talk.
You can't try and snipe at the Conservatives for things that weren't our fault.
Oh, I mean, I haven't got time. Don't tell your big mate Donald Trump to tell his big mate Vladimir Putin to stop killing people, then we can solve that problem like that. Are you going to be a net contributor to our society? But are you going to better the lives of the people already here?
Won't be surprised to know I disagree.
Why? Why do you disagree, though? Why do you want our young people left on the scrap heap? The court's time being wasted laying down a ruling on what is a woman.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 26 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham. Paul, on the subject of Keir Starmer's successes, says, Mike, I beg to differ. Starmer has had success. He's been promoted from Captain Flip-Flop to major disaster, to general catastrophe in less than a year. Amazing, says Paul in Hitchin. P.S. Could you give a shout-out to my friend Ray in Banbury? You sure you don't mean Banbury? I don't know. He loves your show. Yeah, Paul, thanks very much indeed. Keir Starmer's his greatest achievement, says Richie, since he became Prime Minister. It goes on and on, you know what I mean. Could I suggest a movement, says Barry, to have Starmer's knighthood removed, along with the squeaky-toed Mayor of London, on the grounds of total incompetence? Barry, that's a very good idea. Yes. Well, anyway, listen, let's move on because we've got to talk to Mike Neville now, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Mike, very good morning to you. I know we're going to talk about the Harry Dunn case in a minute, but let me just ask you first up about this national inquiry business into the grooming gangs and the rape gangs, because I'm wondering, first of all, whether this is going to end up being as good and as thorough as we all want it to be. And I was wondering, from your point of view, police-wise, I mean, what's the minimum that you would need to have, say, from any police investigation to find out whether anybody is guilty of a cover-up, whether anybody is guilty of breaking the criminal code?
Well, there needs to be a look into these investigations. Every major investigation has a decision log where people have recorded what they'll do, particularly things around the media. But also officers can come forward. I mean, I was on with Kevin O'Sullivan last night, and I recounted the tale where I saw a detective superintendent rip out a page of a report, which showed that young black men were more likely to be committing robberies, and that was just ripped out because it was just after the Lawrence inquiry, and that was a way of furthering her career. So some older officers will have evidence, but there'll also be written reports where people have made decisions not to conduct investigations, and these really must be sought out. Maggie Oliver's exposed all sorts of senior officers or former senior officers in the Greater Manchester Police. And it's about time they were held to account, because they deliberately stopped the investigation into the rape, murder and molestation of young girls. Yeah, indeed. And it's not going to be hard to find these people, because, I mean, she certainly knows who some of them are, and there'll be other people who know who other, you know, sort of potentially complicit people were in councils and in social services and everything else. Yeah, and there'll be a lot of worried people. There are a lot of worried people who literally jumped on the bandwagon after the McPherson report. I saw them myself, ruthless careerists who really didn't care about the community. They cared about their next promotion, particularly in the police. They'd sell their grandmother for the next rank. And I'm sure there's the same sort of individuals in the social services, and it'll be good to see them punished. That's what I'd like to see. Yes, I think you speak for everybody when you say that. Speaking of punishing people, police admit failures in the Harry Dunn case after an independent review basically found that they prioritised the welfare of the suspect rather than the victim. Yes, this case, if people remember, go back to summer 2019, Harry Dunn was on a motorbike near an RAF base in Northamptonshire, and a woman, Anne Scholassus, pulled out on the wrong side of the road. She was an American who'd only been there for 3 weeks, and killed him in a traffic accident. And then she fled the country. And there's been all sorts of failings highlighted. One, that they seem to prioritise that she seemed in shock rather than maybe arresting her at the scene for causing death by dangerous driving, because it would have been pretty obvious that she was on the wrong side of the road. And then there's all sorts of failings involving the disgraced Chief Constable, Nick Adderley, who, of course, was famously booted out for wearing all sorts of medals that he wasn't entitled to as well. Yeah, I mean, the problem for this police investigation, I suppose, is that she was a spy, effectively, we now learn, with diplomatic immunity, and they obviously didn't really know how to deal with that. Yeah, it's very difficult when dealing with that. I mean, what strikes me here, though, Mike, I was in the military police out in Germany in the 80s, and this sort of thing about people driving on the wrong side of the road was a regular occurrence when a new regiment, was posted to Germany. People were run over because they looked the wrong way. So this happened, but what happened was no one was flown back to Britain. Any serviceman who was involved in an accident like that would face a punishment appropriate to what they'd done. So the whole affair was pretty disgraceful and really impacted on the relationship with the United States. And there was all sorts of disagreements about whether she had diplomatic immunity or not. But Nick Adderley didn't help by sort of interfering in things, undermining the officers who were investigating this and making all sorts of weird statements, which resulted in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office telling him to shut up and not put things out in the media. And all this resulted in the family being let down. And Harry's mother, Charlotte Charles, has been awarded an MBE for a road safety campaign. And after this, and the family must be praised for the way that they dealt with the death of their son and then used it for positive things to try and get things changed regarding road safety and this sort of incident.
Yeah, absolutely right. Great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. We've got to leave it there. Mike Neville there, thanks very much indeed. The former police detective, of course, down at Scotland Yard, retired now. Coming up, Fiona Goddard is going to join us. She's on the front page of the Daily Mirror today saying, speak up for justice. Survivors of these terrible, terrible rape gangs that have been subjected to some of the worst abuse that anybody could ever have been suffer from a young age, some of them as young as 12 and 13. Fiona Goddard's going to be saying why many more girls need to come forward to get justice. She says she's had to fight tooth and nail to bring to justice just some of the 50 vile men who targeted her, plied her with booze and drugs and raped her from the age of 14. It's absolutely extraordinary what went on. And this investigation, this commission, whatever you want to call it, this inquiry, surely must have judicial powers. It must have the power to subpoena people, to subpoena records. I said this yesterday, and I'll keep saying it, because we're going to keep on top of this until something proper is done. Sarah Vine was on the show a little bit earlier. She was talking about Boris Johnson and when he was Prime Minister. And Stuart says this regarding Sarah and Boris. Let's not forget it's Boris's fault and the useless Tories that we now have the worst Prime Minister and government of all time, destroying what's left of our once great country. And Martin from Swindon says, how about Boris for reform? I'm not sure he'd ever do that, but you never know with Boris, do you? You never know. It's 9:33.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:35. I'm Mike Graham with you, of course, right up until the 10 o'clock hour when Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here. One here from Liam who says, Mike, I have no trust in this inquiry. How can we trust it? And yet a few months ago they were looking to lower the legal penalties for ethnic minorities, which would most likely have included asylum seekers and Pakistani males. They knew then the Casey report was going to be bad. The cover-up was already attempted. I'm sure it will be a whitewash. England is a disgrace on the world stage due to Starmer and his cronies. Let's get a voice note from Andy on Dan Hodges.
Hello, Mike. It's so refreshing to hear that Dan Hodges has actually come round to your way of thinking, common sense-wise. He always seems to agree with you on everything. He's obviously been listening to Morning Glory and it's had a super effect on him. So, go Dan. Well done, Mike.
Andy, thank you very much indeed. I take personal credit for turning him, it has to be said. Because you remember, he used to defend Labour at every single moment. Now, all he does is attack them relentlessly. It's brilliant. Let's talk to Fiona Goddard. She was, of course, one of the many grooming gang victims, rape gang victims. She's on the front page of the Mirror today, urging other girls to come forward to try and smash this sick culture of abuse, which is still destroying an awful lot of young lives because it's still going on. We need this inquiry to be full and proper and absolutely with teeth, so that people can be locked up for a very long time, not just for the acts of rape themselves, but for the complicity and the cover-up too. Fiona, very good morning to you.
Hi.
Thanks very much for joining us. You say in the Mirror today you had to fight tooth and nail to bring to justice just some of the 50 horrible, vile, ghastly individuals who abused you for so long from the age of 14. How many of those men did you manage to go behind bars?
I had 9 men convicted in 2019. They were sentenced to 132.5 years.
Right. Well, that's at least something, isn't it? And hopefully they'll be in there for a very, very long time. But, I mean, there must be many others then who have never seen the inside of a courtroom.
Yeah, no, there's a lot more that are on the streets. Because the things weren't prosecuted or, like, the people weren't arrested at the time, when it comes to dealing with this as a historical case, there was a lack of evidence in many cases. The 9 men that were convicted, there was a huge amount of evidence in relation to them, but the rest of them, there wasn't sufficient evidence, or even my memory wasn't clear enough on stuff to be able to convict any of them.
Right. And so when you were being abused at the time, when you were just a young teenager, being plied with drink and drugs, I mean, was there ever a point at which anybody tried to help you or to try to get you out of that situation?
No, so there was a serious case review published in 2021 which covered my case. She said there was over 7 instances of assault, sexual assault or rape that I had disclosed or reported that they had failed to investigate, that I hadn't been treated as any other child or person would have done.
Right. So they weren't really that interested. I mean, did you have any conversations with the police or with social workers or anything like that?
They once asked me if I were being groomed, but I didn't understand what groomed was.
Yeah.
So I said no. They said, so what's happening then? So I told them that they were taking us out, buying us stuff. They asked if they were having sex with us, and I said yes. So I basically confirmed that I was being groomed, but I didn't understand. But they never did nothing about it. They just said okay and carried on.
And what age were you then?
Between 14 or 15 when this got brought up.
So you were underage still, technically?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just horrendous, isn't it? And I mean, do you still see any of these characters walking around the streets where you live?
Sometimes. I also, after the men were convicted, I had contact from someone on Facebook who was like, oh, do you remember when I used to take you to these apartments? And I was just a bit taken aback that he would respond to, do you know, men being sentenced for my abuse by saying, you know, do you remember when I basically did it to you as well?
Well, but thinking that you might actually say, oh yeah, that's great, why don't we go for a drink?
Yeah, and I just blocked him. At that point, I'd just been through 5 years of the investigation and then 8 weeks of the trial, and I just couldn't deal with taking on another thing. So I reported it to the police, but I didn't pursue it in any sense because it had taken too much of a toll on me by that point.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, in terms of your call today in the Mirror to get more victims to come forward, I mean, there must be hundreds and thousands of people that have been affected by this. I mean, do you have any idea how many of your friends or people that you know have had this same problem?
I reported over 50 girls' names to the police when I did my video evidence that I knew directly had been abused at the same time as me by the same kinds of people, like the same groups of people. Because they work within groups, and the groups target multiple different people, and they don't just singular, you know, focus on one person. I also have had contact with dozens of other girls since then that have also said the same happened to them. But I think there's a big emphasis at the moment on the fact that there is a disproportion with the Pakistani men and the victims being white British. And when I'm calling for people to come forward, I just don't want it to be just focused on that. I want everyone to know that no matter who you are or who your abusers were, that everyone needs to be coming forward, because all crimes like this are absolutely sickening. So I don't want anyone to feel like they don't fit into this category to come forward. I do want to urge everyone to be coming forward and getting their own justice.
Right. And what about this inquiry? Do you have any faith in this government to make it work properly, to actually go after the right people and the people, because there must be people, like I said before, who were involved in covering it all up, you know, in police who didn't want to bother investigating it, police who wanted to just treat you as if you were a prostitute and somebody who was willing to do what you were doing, you know, people in councils, all of that.
Yeah, so for my experience, people like, you know, the police that are on the beat or the social workers that are actually coming out, some of them did try speaking up, and the managers further up the line was basically threatening their jobs if they carried on. The care home staff, one of them did try getting us to stop leaving the building, and he was suspended. And then after that, the care home staff didn't want to try and intervene. So it did seem to come from higher up. And I think this inquiry, I have hope, but I also have doubts. I sent Jess Phillips a text message last night saying I don't trust the government because of all the failings that have happened before, but I am willing to work with you all for the best interest of this inquiry, no matter which political party it is, because I think that everyone needs to come together now, not just the governments and the political parties, but the communities, and finally try and get a little bit of justice. So I will try my hardest to work with anyone I can to try and make sure this inquiry is done properly, because it needs to be done now. We've been let down too many times. It can't happen again.
No, of course. And what did Jess Phillips say?
We've got a Zoom meeting at 11 o'clock today because I wanted to speak to her about my concerns over victims coming forward due to lack of trust in the services from past failings, and how we can work on trying to make sure that if they come forward, they're not going to be failed again.
Right. Well, that's very brave of you, and you're doing great work. Fiona, thank you so much indeed for talking to us, and maybe we'll get you back on and find out what you can do with Jess Phillips, you know, who's also come under a bit of flack over the course of the last few days. Fiona Goddard, a victim of more than 50 men in Bradford over a period of years, from the age of about 13 to 14 to 15 to 16, and only about 9 of those men have ever faced justice for what they did to her. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Coming up next, we'll tell you what the letters page of The Sun says, because that is all about this very subject.
Well, also he had some kind of stuff cooking. You know, I don't know if you noticed it or not, but there's this little war in the Middle East, you know, and there's also a big budget fight going on in Washington, D.C., and then there's Russia continues to send drones and missiles into Ukraine. So he's got some stuff to do besides standing around with Macron, you know, talking about where you can get the best croissant. You know, come on.
He
showed up.
Yeah, can you imagine seeing the guest list and thinking, oh, no, not that lot again?
Some of these people. And then and then you're stuck in Canada. So what do they serve you? Like some poutine and a hockey puck.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:46. We're here for just about another 10 minutes. Julie Hartley-Grew will be here, of course, taking you on all the way through till 1 p.m. Mike has got a voice note for us on Iran.
Just listening to what's going on with Iran. Starmer's probably sent some aeroplanes over to Cyprus, just in case. But I have a feeling he's being kept completely out of the loop, and that's why he has not made any comments. I believe that America and Israel cannot trust Starmer because his party is full of Palestinian sympathisers who would spill all the secrets at a moment's notice.
I think tragically, Mike, you're absolutely right. He was not given the information when Israel decided to attack Iran back end of last week. I think it was early hours of Friday morning. And who can blame them? And that's a terrible position, I think, for a British Prime Minister and a British government to be in, isn't it? Dreadful. Coming up, we're going to speak very shortly to Steve Mullen, Templegate, Sun's racing top tipster on Royal Ascot. First, this. We were just talking there to Fiona Goddard yesterday about her ordeal and about the rape gangs, and we've spoken an awful lot about it today on the show. In the Sun's letters page today also has loads of it there. This from Max in Southampton. The grooming gang scandal, one of the worst of modern times, is a huge stain on Britain as a nation. I hope the full inquiry that Labour have now agreed to gets to the truth and that all the guilty are punished. Harry in Lancashire, Ashton-under-Lyme, says the brave people who stood up against the grooming gangs and demanded a public inquiry have been proved right. At first, Labour politicians insulted them, but now they have accepted Baroness Casey's recommendations for a full inquiry. Those politicians should apologise, but they probably won't. We'll be letting you know what the nation thinks, of course, throughout the rest of the week here, through the Sun letters page and through all of the great messages that we get from you as well. Keep those coming. 87222 for the text. Talk to us on Twitter at talkTV, and you can leave a voice note 0344 499 1000. Let's go to Royal Ascot now. And it's time for Templegate. Steve Mullen. Steve, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Another beautiful looking day out there. It wasn't so great for the King yesterday, was it, after all?
Oh, no, he had terrible luck in running with his horse. I mean, there's no decorum anymore. You think they'd have got out of the way for him and let him run through, but he got a terrible run up the rail. He got boxed in and he crossed the line with a full tank of petrol, but unfortunately about 10 lengths behind the winner.
Yeah, didn't get to use it at all. What's going on today? What do you got for us?
Yeah, today, well, yesterday's nap won, so that was a good start. So hopefully we can keep the ball rolling with Calmers in the Queen's Vase, coming over from Ireland. That's at 3:05.
Yeah.
He's been in great form in Ireland, and this is a stamina race, and he's got loads of stamina. He's got a really good jockey experience, jockey Billy Lee, and at around 4-1, I think Calmers has got a really good chance.
Yeah, OK. And what about Anmat?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, Anmat. Yeah, he had the right ding-dong with Los Angeles last time over in Ireland. And they face each other again at 4:20, and I think Anmat can turn the form around at Ascot. He really loves Ascot. He won the champion stakes here last season, and I think 7-2 about Anmat to get the better of Los Angeles this time. I think that's a really nice bet as well.
Yeah, OK. And one final one for the Royal Hunt Cup, Curat.
Yeah, it's a tough race. There's only 30 in it, so we'll need a little bit of luck again. But yeah, he's another one. He loves Ascot as well. He was just timmed in the Victoria Cup here last time, which is a really good trial for this race.
Yeah.
He's got a top trainer, Rafe Beckett, and Kirat. I think he's trading around the 10-1. He may be a bit shorter by the off time, but I think that's fair value in a wide open race.
Okay. And any joy for the King if he'd be there again today, won't he?
Yeah. Yeah, he's going every day. I mean, I think he's really into the racing, and he's got Rainbow's Edge in the 5:35, the Kensington Palace Stakes. She's got William Buick on board. He's a really good jockey. She's trading around 4-1. Again, you need a little bit of luck at Ascot, but I think after yesterday's bad luck, maybe he's due a turn of fortunes this time. Rainbow's Edge in the 5:35.
OK, we'll look forward to that. Great to see you. Steve, thanks very much indeed. Templegate, Steve Mullen there in the Sun. 12 pages of racing there today, of course. And those three tips again, Calmers in the 3:05, Anmat in the 4:20, Prince of Wales Stakes, and Curat in the Royal Hunt Cup at 5 o'clock. Plenty of money to be made if you get lucky, is all I can say. How about this from D in Tunbridge Wells? Good morning, Mike. From Starmer to say we haven't always told our story as well as we should says it all. This isn't a fairy story. These are people's lives that he is juggling with. We need a credible Prime Minister like Nigel Farage who tells us the truth, not a practised liar. Well, I think that's right. And we spoke to Nigel Farage a little bit earlier on in the show. He came in to talk to us about a great many things, including the boat crisis in the Channel and Keir Starmer's biggest mistake.
Do you know what his biggest mistake was? Going into politics.
Yes.
And why do I say that? Because actually, if you go into politics, you do it because you believe in something.
Yeah.
You think there's a course of action that needs to be taken that you think will make the country better. This bloke doesn't believe in a single thing other than the niceness of human rights law, international law, and the North London set. And what you're seeing with his premiership, you're seeing somebody who wanted to be Prime Minister for the sake of being Prime Minister.
Right.
The only thing that you could argue is going well is, or at least he thinks is going well, is Starmer on the world stage.
Yeah.
Going to the White House, the president's being nice to him, the president's repeatedly being nice about him and about Britain, you know, meeting with Zelensky. These are the things that he thinks shows him in a very good light and a good image. And when it comes to domestic politics, I mean, he's U-turning on everything. What is remarkable, you know, I spent the whole of April on the road, as you know, out campaigning for those elections. The level of dislike of Starmer, I've never seen in
I haven't. No, it's absolutely vitriolic.
And it's not just ideological either.
No.
They don't like him.
No.
Whether it's his voice, his approach, and you see these figures, you know, after the first 300 days, he is the most unpopular Prime Minister of modern times.
He is.
By some margin.
Incredible.
And I can't see any way back. The current course we're on is failing. And we can sit and criticise the French, you know, who've already had £800 million. And from Reeves's statement last week, I can see there's another couple of £100 million going their way. Even if the French do their stuff and start dragging them out of the water, those boats are launching from Dunkirk down to Berck. It's 100 miles of French beach. We will never stop the boats from leaving France. They need 10,000 soldiers on the beaches to stop every boat from going. The reason they're coming isn't the French's fault. The reason they're coming, it's our fault. It's about time we faced up to them. It's about foreign criminals in British prisons not being deported, even though they want to be.
They want to be.
Well, say, I mean, you know, let's say you're from Lithuania. And you've been given a 15-year prison sentence. At least if you go back to Lithuania to serve the time, you know, your mum can come and see you. You know? We're not, even though people want to be deported, they're not being deported. The idea that we don't have as big a shortage of prison places as you think if we get rid of the foreign criminals, and we're just not doing it.
What's been your biggest mistake, do you think, since you came back, if you have one?
I think I probably have spent too much time in the office, too much time doing administrative stuff, too much time trying to build the party. I probably could have spent more time actually out on the road, even though I spend more than any other. And that's why now, putting a team in place, I'm not saying once it's done I can forget about it, but I need to be out doing what I'm best at. So I probably overemphasised the office side of work rather than being outside.
Nigel Farage talking to me earlier. You'll get the full interview, of course, on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and type in my name and you will find it. It's 9:55. Morning, Mike says, tag. Listening to the show, as always, but I feel physically sick regarding the grooming gangs, and my heart goes out to all that have been affected by these monsters. Stephen Cornwall says, Mike, this grooming gang inquiry is already beginning to look like Starmer and Labour's equivalent to Cameron's Brexit referendum. And Michelle in Swanage, Mike, Starmer's greatest achievement, well, at last the country is united. Unfortunately for him, it's in our hatred for him. Yeah, well, there is that. Let's get a voice note from Darren on the biggest mistake.
All right, Mike, it's Darren again in Holland. Keir Starmer, well, he's definitely not failed today, man. Wound me up big time again. Jesus, man, why can't he just answer the question? Do you know what I mean? You'd ask the question, answer it. Wound up again. Cheers, Keir.
Yeah. Well, let's get him, shall we, on his greatest mistake. He was asked this by Beth Rigby from Sky last night.
In terms of mistakes, look, I think that we haven't always told our story as well as we should, explained our decisions in the way that might, in retrospect, have been better, but that's the nature of politics. I suppose the story at the end of the first year is this. We had to clear up the mess, and the first year was really about that. But as we now turn into the second year with the spending review, now's the time we can show that having cleared up that mess, taken those tough but necessary decisions, now you can see in the spending review, with the investment we're making in our public services, in our infrastructure, in our jobs, apprentices, you name it, you can see the difference that a Labour government makes.
You can see a difference the Labour government has made. Unfortunately, you can see what damage has been caused. Kaz says this: Mike, how are the migrants who get free driving lessons getting their provisional driving licences when they have thrown their identification into the English Channel? Well, that's a very good question. I mean, how do they get anything? Because nobody knows who they are. Now, I'm delighted to say that we've been asking about when Keir Starmer's going to break his silence and talk to us all about what's going on with the old commission, the independent inquiry, you know, all of that. He's put out this video just in the last half an hour. It says, in the Rockies, working to deliver for Brits back home. And here he is at the G7 in the Rockies. It's got some music to it, this one as well. Here we are. They're very nice. Keir Starmer walking behind a helicopter. It's not recommended, that, by the way. I wouldn't do that. The G7 is over, and there they are. Well, look, I'm in another motorcade. There's Zelensky, a nice big man hug. There are some of us having some meetings, and there I am with Donald Trump. And there I am for another press conference. Oh, there's Ursula von der Leyen. And there I am, gazing out into the wilderness. It's just lovely, isn't it? Marvellous. Very happy. Julie Hartley-Brewer, very good morning to you.
He loves the meeting. Looks lovely there.
Doesn't it look nice?
Looks like a good holiday destination,
yes,
said Judith Chalmers.
Yes, I think so. Yes, never been there yet. But, you know, there's things to be said. There's things we talked about this yesterday.
I have to say, given that they had this Gatesy report for 2 weeks before they published it, I think the timing of its publication is a little bit suspect.
It is a bit.
Let's do it while the Prime Minister's away and he's doing all this whole world stage thing. All Prime Ministers get into this. They love being on the world stage. Yeah. They love looking very puffed up important in front of the flag. They don't just like... They're not very interested in doing stuff at home that we all care about.
No, or talking about it would seem. We're still really waiting.
But yesterday he completely defended, saying, you know, this is jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Politicians who shout and scream and don't do anything about it. But you didn't want to do anything about it.
And he doesn't do anything about a lot of things. He makes a lot of noise about stuff, and we're already still asking questions about the inquiry.
I genuinely
What's it really going to be
if
like?
we had no government at all right now,